Arpedia Online is known as the best fantasy-themed game among modern virtual reality games. It uses a specific game capsule to deliver an unbelievable immersion of reality to the five senses. With their patented scanning technology, it's possible to create an avatar identical to the user. Paired with the latest AI technology, NPCs and monsters act as if they had real sentience, offering a fun and well-paced experience without being overwhelming. In its reviews, Arpedia Online is rated as the best online game in Korea. Due to its popularity, people have started to pay attention to the actions of players among the top rankings. But the most notable among them is the 50th ranked warrior, Bartz. The reason why people are focusing on him instead of the higher rankers is because in Arpedia Online, where playing in a group is considered essential, he is something called a hardcore solo player who soloed the Wrath Dragon. There are various rumors about him. Some say he is someone with a connection to the game's development, or that he would be a very wealthy man who spent a large fortune on his character. But his true identity is that of an unemployed man named Kang Yuhen, our protagonist. Kang, boasting, says he doesn't know why people are so excited about him killing a mere Wrath Dragon, and that the community was abuzz while he was visiting his grandmother. But now he's naked in the middle of the city and wonders what the hell is going on. A knight points to our protagonist, calling him crazy and laughing, while others were disgusted by what they saw, wondering if they should call the administrator or report him. Kang despairs, asking them to wait and that he will equip his clothes, and begs them not to report him. However, he realizes that his inventory is empty. Wondering what's happening, he can't see any of his items and questions if it might be a bug, asking where the report button is. Upon touching something, the hero realizes something shocking. Kang was back to level 1 and without any items. His mother, hearing her son scream, quickly enters his room asking if there was a thief around. Our very shaken hero catches his mother's attention to explain, and she waits with some anxiety about what would come next. However, breaking the expectations of it being something really serious, Kang warns that he believes his account has been hacked. His mother, after hearing what was said, asks if he is talking about the account Kang had in his game, which is confirmed by him, causing his mother to become enraged because he had screamed like that just for this, and questions Kang about having promised her that after locking his college, he would sort out his life on his own. But all he has done is stay home playing games, and when he goes to the prep course, he sleeps during class, so how could he sort out his life this way? Kang's mother slams the door violently, saying that he is giving her a heart attack from so much anger. Kang retreats to a corner with sadness, lamenting the time it took to level up his account and asking for his avatar to be returned. The best solo player in the world, with several titles like the Dragon Slayer, has disappeared. An employee from DreamMax Corporation asks how he can help. Kang had called support and was reporting the invasion of his account. He said he sent a ticket but received a response that everything was normal and that can't be true. The employee confirms the account details with Kang and tells him to wait a moment. Kang anxiously awaits the employee's response, and the same responds that the hero's character was created 4 days ago, not seeming to exist any anomaly in his account. Kang asserts that he created his character during the open beta, and his level was reset, besides being completely naked. The employee says that this Bartz, whom Kang refers to, was deleted 5 days ago, but the protagonist was out all this time, so how could he have deleted the account? He says that DreamMax has a world-class security system, and that it's a pity to inform him, but there's a good chance that this is the result of poor digestion of personal information. Kang, annoyed, asks if they are saying it's his fault, and the employee recommends that he change his password weekly to prevent such things from happening again. The system shows that he did not change his password, and the terms of service state that the company is not responsible in case of poor management of personal information by users. Almost crying, Kang says he understood and hangs up the call. After hanging up, he affirms that if it wasn't him who deleted the character, then it's clear that it was hacked. Regardless of not knowing who it was, he will not forgive the responsible for doing this. Kang, determined, affirms that he will find this damn person. Outside the house, someone approaches. It's the protagonist's brother, who enters the room talking about some requests from their mother. But he finds Kang in a deplorable state of sadness and drunkenness. Kang offers a drink to his brother, and he thinks he's crazy because he's underage. Kang's brother asks if he finally lost it while studying for the civil servant exam, but Kang says he lost. Today was the day his other half left this world, so how could he be okay on a day like this? A little disappointed, his brother tries to console him but thinks he's a loser because besides spending the whole day playing, he still makes all this drama. Back to what he had come to say, the brother says that the mother wants him to go get a ladle, but Kang says he's busy and tells his brother to go. Hyun warns that he has to go to the prep course and thinks that he is a high school student and his brother an unemployed, making it clear who should help. Kang thinks his brother is a damn person, and the same has no respect for his older brother. He gets irritated at the thought of his brother thinking he's better than him. Arriving at a convenience store, he talks to his father, saying that his mother asked him to get a ladle. Kang says he has no idea, and while looking at some ladles, he says he believes hers broke while preparing rice. The father doesn't seem to believe, asking how much force would be necessary to make a ladle break like that. Kang says he doesn't know, but all objects have inherent durability despite his mother probably not thinking about it. While holding a ladle, the hero had a flash of an idea, thinking about the issue of durability. His father looks at him scared while Kang behaves like a villain who discovered another infallible plan. He turns with confidence and says he understood. Filled with happiness, he says Eureka, and disappears from that store in an instant, even lifting his father's wig off his head. The father yells at him to at least close the door when leaving, but Kang was already far away, climbing the stairs at a breakneck pace. He thinks that Arpedia Online has a durability system, and each piece of equipment consumes a quantity of durability when used. When the item's durability reaches 0, it is destroyed. That's why players were rushing to blacksmiths who are capable of repairing their weapons in a short time. As the repair capacity changes by level, the bigger and more expensive the equipment, the higher the level of the blacksmith to whom it should be entrusted. Now what would happen if a high-level blacksmith started repairing equipment for a low price? So everyone would go to him asking to repair their equipment. All of Bart's equipment was expensive and rare, so there's no way the hacker could have deleted them along with the account. If the hacker decided to sell the items before deleting the account, he can find them by following the traces of the sales. Kang tells the damn person who hacked him to wait just a little longer, and he will beat him up when he finds him. The hero finds himself in front of a large gate and a golden ball with wings. The golden ball was a guide that welcomes the hero, asking if he would like to enter the game, which is denied by Kang, who says he would like to create a new character. The guide asks to choose the character's birth date, and Kang says any random one is fine. The hero's birth date will be April 4th, and the guide asks if he wishes to choose the character's name randomly as well, but is denied since Kang would like to choose it himself. He thinks about the name he should use and wanted it to be something short and imposing like his old avatar. He says he knows and chooses the name Zig. His name will then be Zig, and the huge door opens, declaring the beginning of the game. The character Zig is being created, and the hero affirms that this will be the name of the best blacksmith in Arpedia. Already inside the game, he hears a conversation, but our hero doesn't understand. The blacksmith says that what he does is a job that requires unwavering patience and resilience, not something a youngster like him could do as if it were easy. Now that he's understood, the blacksmith asks the hero to get out of his workshop. This is the blacksmith Pabuchi. The irritated blacksmith points his hammer at Kang and asks him to disappear from there, leaving our hero unsure how to handle this situation. There are 2 ways to obtain a production job in Arpedia. One is to learn the job by buying a skill book, while the other is to learn while working. The latter option allows you to earn money along with a job promotion, but everyone avoids it, because all the NPC blacksmith masters have a strong personality. Among them, our hero highlights Pabuchi because he always fought when he went to repair his equipment with Bart's. But considering his current situation, this is his only option. Kang knocks on the blacksmith's door, believing that an advancement mission would be easy. He enters the place asking for permission and states that he wants to become a blacksmith. The blacksmith there asks if he heard right, and the hero confirms, saying he wants to be the best blacksmith in the world. Pabuchi then says no chance, which surprises the hero. Pabuchi says that just by looking, he knows he will never be a blacksmith, and the hero asks to at least be tested before. The blacksmith thinks about the test request. Kang says he can be asked to do anything. Pabuchi then separates a pile of logs for our hero and asks him to cut them all in one day. He says he will teach if Kang finishes this job, leaving Kang discredited with the mission given to him. The blacksmith states that he can give up if he wants, but the hero decides to start working. However, he doesn't seem to have a knack for it. He tried to hit the log, but the logs seem to be dodging his axe. The hero gets annoyed at having to do that and states he has seen several players advancing at the same time and learning to hammer. A man next to him replies that it's due to affinity. Kang asks who he is, and the man replies that he is also trying to become an apprentice. The man reminds the hero of the character creation day and explains that the birth date indicates his affinity with jobs. Kang despairs because he didn't know that birth dates were so important. The man consoles him, saying he also got annoyed with that. The hero then considers creating a new character, but he thinks it would be a hassle to reach level 10 again and gives up. He believed that Pabuchi would teach him anyway if he completed the challenge, so he continues with his mission. After a while, the woods began to be cut easily. Our hero had improved, and the blacksmith is impressed with everything that was done in a single day. Kang reminds him of his promise, asking if he will now be hired, but Pabuchi denies it. Wielding a sword, he asks the hero to go to Lanko Mountain and bring back 10 coals. Thinking about the mountain, he remembers that the suggested level for the mines is from 15 to 45, and his boss is very dangerous. Kang asks if the blacksmith will be responsible for his death, and he says that's why he's giving him a sword. Our protagonist wonders how bad his affinity is. He takes the sword, accepting the challenge, and asks if he promises to make him a blacksmith after that, which Pabuchi confirms. Already in the mountains, the mission is for the hero to go to the marked location and obtain 10 black coals. Kang begins to collect the coals, putting extreme effort into his work. While resting, he thinks that not everything is resolved with brute force, and tries to remember the pattern of the woodcuts. One must hold the shaft lightly and swing like a sword. Kang delivers a powerful cut, and obtains a black coal, feeling proud. He then decides to continue thinking that it's just remembering the swing of a sword. The mission is then completed. Only the coal delivery to the blacksmith is left. In the midst of a war scenario, the hero walked calmly. While thinking about the hacker, a monster spawns in front of him. Being totally astonished by that powerful monster. To make matters worse, he was the mountain boss, the Furious Boar. The boar roars at the hero, trying to intimidate him. Kang is stunned and starts to run away with all his might. All the players in the place are scared by the boss's appearance. The Furious Boar only appears once a day in a random location. It was a huge coincidence that he appeared in front of Kang. Due to his class, the hero thinks he will die with a single attack if hit. The boar opens its mouth, showing its sharp teeth, and tries to attack the hero, who narrowly dodges. The hero discovers that the boss is focused on him and knows he needs to run away soon. In this game, production jobs have a great disadvantage in combat. In virtual reality games, the character's body is connected to the real one. As Arpedia Online focuses on realism, this means that depending on the person's natural abilities, disadvantageous fights are still viable. The hero advances knowing that the boar's weakness is the head and believes that no matter how weak his damage is, he can win if he hits the weakness. The hero's sword approaches the boar, but it is repelled by the boss, making Kang surprised. The boar advances furiously towards him, and the hero understands that he was blocked because he doesn't have movement speed. In trouble, he thinks that if he knew this would happen, he would put some points in dexterity. As the boar approaches, it roars loudly. A few seconds from impact, the hero tries to come up with a plan. He thinks whether he should run but says no, wondering why he's so worried about a mere furious boar and heading into battle. The hero remembers he is Bart's. Even though he's a temporary character, his class is permanent. As he advances, his stamina suddenly runs out, and when he's almost hit by the boar, an arrow is shot at the boss. Kang realizes it's a bow attack. The boar, however, isn't so injured, having only lost a piece of its horn, but that was important to it. The person who shot the arrow wonders what they did, not believing they only did that much damage. The boar then turns its attention to the woman, jumping on her and scaring the player. Kang advises aiming for the head, where its weakness is. The archer then notices a bright spot on the boss's head, and fires an energy shot that causes 720 damage, finally defeating the furious boar. The protagonist is relieved, saying it was close. Seeing the archer approach, Kang thinks of thanking her, but the woman puts her arms against his shoulders, asking if they haven't met somewhere before. She says he looks familiar and asks if she's wrong. Kang is uncomfortable with the closeness and seems not to know the lady. The woman asks if he didn't hear what she said. Before he can say anything, Kang starts running, leaving the curious woman behind. Finally, the coals are delivered, and the protagonist reflects that it's the first time he's seen these things. Pabuchi admits he didn't expect Kang to succeed. The hero annoyed asks why he sent him then. The blacksmith says he was wrong about him and the hero's courage should be put to good use, finally hiring him. Kang is excited because he succeeded, and the system guide appears asking if Kang would like to become a blacksmith, which he confirms. Finally, Kang becomes a blacksmith. He thinks that the story of the legend Zig has just begun. The blacksmith asks what Kang is doing standing still, calling him to work. As he goes, the hero can't stop thinking that he will find the guy who hacked his account. Kang starts hammering a sword, but he wasn't very skilled at it. After finishing another job, Kang optimistically thinks that maybe this is good. But when showing it to the blacksmith, he says it's nonsense, asserting that with this edge, it doesn't even cut paper and destroying the hero's morale by saying he's lucky he doesn't deduct the materials used. Kang asks if he isn't being too demanding, and the blacksmith tells him to shut up and make 30 more swords. If even one of them turns out like that blade, I'll be fired. The hero gets angry and then cries. But he's determined to make the best sword Pabuchi has ever seen. The hero holds a sword and analyzes it, noticing that it's not good. He wonders where he's going wrong. The description states that this is a terrible short sword made by an inexperienced blacksmith and is so bad it doesn't cut anything without breaking. Faced with the work presented, Kang sees himself one step from dismissal. He tries again and realizes that this time he forged a different sword with strange blue lines. Looking at the others, he notices that these lines are also present in them. Kang approaches another blacksmith who asks what he thinks he's doing. The hero sees that the other's sword is better and the lines have a different pattern from his. The blacksmith gets angry and asks to return his creation. But Kang points the sword at the blacksmith's face, which makes him even more irritated. He asks if the man is seeing the same thing he is. Asking if the man can see strange lines on the sword, he just says the hero is crazy and asks not to point his sword in his direction. Our intrigued hero looks at the sword again, but decides to focus on finishing the quest first. The quest asks for the repair of 5 axes that must be delivered to Pabuchi. Kang looks at an axe and notices that there are red lines on this equipment, but he thinks it doesn't matter, and that maybe it will disappear when he repairs the equipment. The hero hits the axe with his hammer, but he destroys it, failing the repair. He cries, thinking that when things are bad, they always find a way to get worse. However, something catches his attention. The broken metal is following the lines. The hero then has an idea that would change everything. In the blacksmith's house, Pabuchi yells for Zig, asking if he has finished his work and saying he's late. He finds Kang and heads towards him. The blacksmith asks where the swords and axes given for repair are. Pabuchi, looking closer, is surprised. Those swords were perfect. Pabuchi holds one of them, impressed, and the hero asks what he thought. Kang excitedly questions if the swords aren't perfect. During the making of the weapons and after many attempts, the hero realized something shocking. The blue lines form when the hammer hits the blade. The shape is influenced by the speed and place where it's hammered. The more aligned and spaced, the better it gets. The red lines are internal cracks and weak points of the equipment. In theory, if you fix both lines, you can perfectly repair anything. These lines are cheating methods to create and repair anything on another level. The hero spent a few nights awake for this, but the result was great. Thanks to that, he gained a broken ability. Pabuchi calls Zig's attention, startling him. He states that the weapons turned out incredible and that he has nothing more to teach. Kang doesn't understand his words. The blacksmith explains that his skills have already surpassed his. Pabuchi was really surprised because people without talent like him usually give up at the beginning. The hero then thinks of something and asks if someone like him has ever passed his test before, which the blacksmith denies. Kang questions if anyone ever said they saw lines, and Pabuchi says he has no idea what he's talking about. The hero believes he must have completed his secret achievement. The conditions could be reaching a certain level and being trained by an NPC blacksmith without having any affinity. Kang believes he hasn't found anything like that on the internet, and it's likely that he's the only one who can see. He is the only player with that ability. In the end, the hero says things are getting very interesting. Pabuchi didn't know why Bartz was so determined to stay alone, and asks what the reason for that is. In his past, Kang suffered bullying. After everything he went through, he believed that people were not trustworthy. Then he wakes up in his father's convenience store. Realizing he was just dreaming about the game, he wonders if it's because he didn't sleep well and didn't want to be taking care of the store while there are no customers. Suddenly, his cell phone rings. The protagonist is curious because he doesn't recognize that number. He answers, asking who it is. The man identifies himself as Yang Hoshik and says he's from DreamMax customer service upon hearing that the hero already wanted to hang up. But the man asks him to wait, asking if he hadn't contacted them a few days ago. Very happy, the hero questions if they decided to restore his character. But the man denies it because according to their policy, they cannot restore deleted accounts. However, they decided to provide a small compensation. Kang questions whether it is equivalent to having lost his character and says he doesn't need any compensation. The employee offers the latest model of a capsule worth $8,000. Our hero is impressed with the amount of money, promptly stating that he will accept. In a tropical landscape, someone asks how the negotiations went. Another person responds saying that in the end, everything turned out all right when they mentioned the capsule. The client is probably grateful for the way the director handled the matter. Sun Sixin says he is happy to hear that. The man talks to the director via notebook and asks why he paid for a capsule for the boy. In turn, the director states that even though he was hacked, he continues to play instead of giving up. And besides, he is playing as a blacksmith, a class that players avoid. Finally, he states he is looking forward to what our hero will deliver in the next update. Inside the game, a message informs that they are recruiting players to invade the Deborah dungeon. The woman from before looks at the announcement, but the group already has an archer, so she wonders why it is so hard to find a group. Whenever she finds one, they give up, and she considers making a group of just 3 people. Suddenly, she bumps into someone. As she turns to apologize, she meets the protagonist again. The woman says it was good to see him, but Kang runs away before even talking. This time, the woman chases him, asking for a bit of his time. Kang tries to escape, but the woman manages to keep up. Finally, our hero tires, yielding and asking what she wants. The woman then asks if he would like to form a group. Kang questions the idea, and the woman explains about the dungeon, but Kang already knew because Bartz was the one who discovered it in the first place. The woman states that she only has 3 members in her group and that if he accepts, they would have 4, which is recommended. However, the hero denies. The woman tries to insist, but he does not want to discuss. With a sad face, she asks the reason. But Kang seems not to want to explain. Amidst a coup, people were impressed with the hero's repairs. Someone says that although it takes some time, the repair rate is 100%. On top of all that, it was very cheap, just 30 gold. Kang, already very tired, did not expect such a crowd and wonders if he should charge more. However, he slaps himself, remembering that his goal is to catch the hacker. Kang calls the next person and comes across the ranger's bow, the D-ranking equipment he had as Bart's. He believes he has found a clue to the hacker, but upon closer inspection, he notices that it lacks a certain insignia. The person pays him, and Kang believes he is being treated like an idiot. 2 men discuss whether they would give a certain thing to a woman, and the other responds that yes, because one must spend money to win over girls. Kang gets irritated with that conversation. The redhead believes that in addition to helping in the dungeon, they are also giving a rare item as a gift, so it would be reasonable if she met them in real life. His friend asserts that after she receives all that, she could not refuse. The men also plan to threaten her if she refused. Kang realizes that they are scoundrels and feels sorry for whoever they are harming. While fixing the bow, the men decide to send a message to the girl. One of them says that her username was Shia, making the hero stop his work and call the men's attention. Kang informs that the repair is completed. However, he does not release the bow. Kang remembers that this was the name of the archer from before. The hero knows that there are no repeated names in the game, and the men get stressed, wanting the bow back. Our hero understands that it is probably the same person, releasing the bow and making the man fall to the ground. The redhead asks if he is okay, and the other gets angry with our hero, going up to him and asking if he has gone mad. He asks Kang to apologize or he will have to uninstall the game. A man in the background asks them to move away if their repairs are ready, since there are more people in line. Tempest Guilford is the leader of the Red Tiger mercenaries, considered the strongest of all, a famous player ranked number 45 on the server, and now he was waiting in line at the blacksmith Zig's shop. The mercenary looks at his sword in terrible condition and thinks that he has good memories with it. It has been through several blacksmiths, and if Zig does not solve this problem, he will go after a specialist. The mercenary observes the men from before and questions why the men do not leave after finishing their repair, then taking the lead and intimidating them up close. The man recognizes the mercenary and wonders why a higher level is there. They apologize and run away. Tempest mocks the education that the protagonist's friends have, and asks Kang if he can repair his beginner's sword. The hero says it is possible and asks him to wait a bit. Tempest reflects that even being a grade D, a 99% probability is incredible, and thinks the blacksmith has hidden skills. Kang tries to concentrate, thinking that it is not his problem, but he cannot help but remember what happened. Tempest is very satisfied and thinks he will hang the sword in the group's hall after the repair. However, Kang ends up breaking the sword, leaving Tempest in shock. The mercenary, almost crying, asks what happened, addressing the hero and asking what he will do about it. But Mr. Zig quickly logs out of the game, leaving Tempest very angry with his nerve. In front of the dungeon, the archer, along with the two men, prepares to enter. A message says that the first to discover it was Bart's, leaving the archer impressed with what she sees. The redhead tells some stories in the woman's ear, and the other says that they have experience in clearing low-level dungeons. When he was about to touch the archer's shoulder, he asks if they should go. But Kang appears suddenly, happy to have arrived on time. Kang asks if they are the team that will explore the Deborah dungeon. The archer is happy to see the ungrateful blacksmith. The hero says he is not ungrateful, and the woman affirms that she saved him and he ran away without thanking. Anyway, she accepts the hero's presence there and introduces herself as Sia. Kang wonders if he will greet her, but decides just to say his name. Sia says it is a pleasure to meet him, and introduces the group members to the hero. She states that the two are at level 70. The men remember that the boy is the blacksmith from the other time, already starting to plan something. The man says that since he is a blacksmith, he must not have fighting skills and asks if he will be okay. Sia assures that it is alright because she has seen for herself that he is strong. Gur says that exploring with a non-combatant is bad and thinks he has never heard of a strong blacksmith. Kang says it is a coincidence and asks if they are not the guys he met at the shop, stating that he should apologize for what happened before. The hero asks him not to worry because he will not talk about useless things. The man remains suspicious and says that they should get going before it is too late. Alden asks if their plan will work even with that bastard along. Gers assures that everything is fine and if something happens they can just eliminate him. If they force Kang to leave, the girl would start to have suspicions. Kang watches from a distance. Already inside the dungeon, the players begin to fight. Sia is impressed with their skills, and Jers believes that Sia must have a crush on him. However, her attention was not on him but on Kang, who defeats the skeletons by striking precisely at their weaknesses. Kang dodges an attack, and a monster prepares to launch another. Having no skills, Kang knows that if he is attacked, he will be in trouble, so he must finish it as quickly as possible. He advances directly at the weakness of the Woodman, which is his energy source and also his heart. He explodes with the attack. The hero's resistance lowers and the system asks him to consume food. Sia comments, impressed with the group members, that even without any skills, Kang was able to defeat them all at once, which leaves Jers irritated for overshadowing his glory. Jers believes he would clear the dungeon easily but fails, and begins to see the blacksmith as a threat. A skeleton prepares to launch a poison arrow. Jers deflects the arrow. However, another hits Kang. Jers begins to feel self-important, believing he was being watched. But Sia's attention was on Kang, who was crying in pain while the system warns that he has entered a state of paralysis. The men boast in front of the hero and mock him, saying he is embarrassing himself. They tell the blacksmith to take a break while he is paralyzed because they cannot carry him on their backs. Sia confronts them, saying they cannot leave him alone. However, Kang agrees to be left aside and warns that after he recovers, he will follow them. Jers says that everyone can see the location of the group members, so there is nothing to worry about. Sia is a bit reluctant about this, but she accepts asking the hero to follow them after the effect passes. The players leave. Then Kang accesses his inventory, equipping a potion and drinking it. Our hero took the antidote and wonders if now he should start. The light from Alden's staff illuminates the path. The men talk among themselves about Sia's bow. Sia asks if it is cheap equipment because it looks luxurious, and the men tell her not to worry because for their level, it's just a common item. Besides, they say they are not archers, so it's no problem, and Sia accepts the gift thanking them. Those men, seeing that she liked it, return to have dirty thoughts, when suddenly something hits the mage's staff, causing the staff to fall to the ground and the light to go out. In the midst of darkness, it was difficult to locate oneself, until the mage finally finds his staff and lights the light. Facing a bunch of skeleton monsters in front of him, they wonder what the hell this is. Looking for Sia and realizing she was already far away, the players say they will try to hold on while surrounded by monsters. Someone pulls Sia away and she asks who it is, saying she needs to go back to help her colleagues. A torch lights up. It is revealed that the person who pulled her was Kang, asking her to calm down. Sia asks what he is doing there and says they must help the others. But Kang claims that if they are level 70, they will be fine in a level 45 dungeon. The warriors have already defeated all the monsters and are very tired. Gers wonders what kind of bastard would do something like this, but he calls his friend's attention to several semi-rare items on the ground. They get excited about the possibility of having done well, and their eyes fill with greed. Suddenly someone emerges, telling them to stop, asking if they are dividing the items on the ground and calling them trash. Gers gets angry and asks who is talking like that. The person identifies himself as King Charles, a level 100 player, and claims to be the owner of the items. Gers and Alden were famous in the community for being bad with female players. They forced women to meet them in real life and threatened them. After that, there are no reports. But the players did not return to the game, making it clear that something very bad had happened. A player disappearing is not very relevant, but the hero had already decided that they would be expelled forever from the game. Back in the game, Kang attracts the attention of the monsters with his torch. He drew the attention of another group of players, and knowing the characteristics of the dungeon well, he knew that anyone could execute this plan. The hero acted like a dungeon thief and stole several items, leaving them in one place. This consequently makes the players extremely angry. Due to the many cases where players are robbed, they hate thieves. So when a small scheme like this appears, everyone joins together to solve it. Amidst the many angry players, Gers and Alden try to explain themselves, but are unsuccessful. In the end, the two ended up leaving the game. Sia looks at the group window, finding it strange that her colleagues log out, asking if they died. Kang makes up an excuse that they had to resolve something, so they disconnected. Sia asks why he didn't notify her, and the hero tells her to ask them when they reconnect. But he already knew that they would no longer connect. The archer asks if they should go back, and Kang agrees, saying that the mission should be in a group. Kang thinks that now that he has achieved his goal, he will go back to focusing on his work. But she says it's a shame because she wanted to beat the record since she won't be able to play anymore. Kang thinks about what she said. When Sia was about to leave, the hero asks her to wait a bit. He says that since the two of them are already there, they should defeat the boss. Kang suggests that they defeat the boss. With a sad face, he said he understands because it must be difficult for her. Remembering his past, he wishes to give Sia an unforgettable memory. She says she doesn't understand very well and asks if what he wants is to defeat the boss in her company, while Kang confirms, moved. But when he realizes it, she was already at the dungeon door waiting for him, which scares him. Suddenly, the door begins to close, and the hero runs to enter in time. He is relieved because he almost didn't make it, and Sia questions if it will really be possible for the two of them to defeat the boss. The hero says that if it's just a stone golem, it's possible, and since he's there won't be any problems. Smiling, he proudly says that this dungeon is very easy for him. During his time as Bartz, the hero had already conquered the Deborah dungeon more than 100 times, reaching the point of becoming a professional. The hero thinks he can help while leveling up, and Sia asks why nothing has appeared yet. Kang sits down and says that if they wait, it will soon appear, thinking it's normal for a stone golem to camouflage itself as such. Suddenly, a noise under the hero catches the group's attention. It's a small hamster that captivates Sia's attention. Kang thinks that hamsters stay close to stone golems. While poking the animal, he thinks this must mean that there is a golem nearby and asks the hamster to tell him where the boss is. A pressure then takes over the environment. The ground begins to move and the hero asks Sia to step back. The golem is taking shape in the air, and gradually taking shape, completing its preparation, identifying itself as a level 60 giant stone golem. Sia is startled, believing that they could defeat such a monster. But Kang reassures her, telling her to just follow the plan. He takes the lead in combat and runs towards the golem. Sia takes her bow and affirms she will provide cover, hitting an arrow on the golem's arm, which irritates it, causing it to attack her. Kang approaches with his sword to strike a blow, and draws the golem's attention to himself as it turns its head 360 degrees. He strikes with all his might but deals only 15 damage, hurting his hand more than the boss itself. The golem decides it's its turn to attack, but the hero successfully dodges. He questions his physical capabilities while jumping, realizing that the parameter is lower than he thought. He knows that to defeat a golem, one must climb to the top of its head. While thinking about what he should do, he observes Sia's arrow while having a brilliant idea. The golem attacks again, but the hero dodges. Kang asks Sia to continue shooting arrows from afar at the golem's joints. She says she understands and will do so. Then she starts dealing damage to various parts of the boss's body. The golem stands upright in front of the player, and Kang takes the time to drink a potion. After finishing the potion, he says that now his path is ready, dashing out and climbing the golem. Kang knows that each golem has a center of weakness, and the weakness of the stone golem as a strong tank is the top of its head, thus delivering a precise blow to the boss. While Kang thought everything was over and considered going to the reward room, something seems strange on the boss's head. He then loses his balance and falls from atop the golem, being caught by Sia, who asks if he's okay. Kang thanks her, and she says she will take care of the boss in his place, so he should hide a little to recover. Kang doesn't understand the suggestion because he believes they almost defeated it, when he realizes the golem was in a strong state of frenzy. Entering berserk mode, the dungeon boss underwent an unbelievable transformation and begins to attack our hero mercilessly. He would never have believed this would happen. While fighting, he thinks he was taking the dungeon too seriously, having cleared it more than 100 times, so there should be no reason for this to happen. Kang, about to be subdued, wonders if it's because it's the first time he sees this attack pattern. He reflects on his days as Bart's, but comes back to reality. The hero was no longer Bart's. Kneeling on the ground, Kang practically awaited his death as the golem approached. But suddenly, a precise shot hits the boss's back. Kang is surprised. It was Sia who had not given up. She pulls Kang, saying that since their HP is low, they will need to hide and ask the hero to run with her. The golem's menacing gaze circulates the area. Hidden behind a rock, Sia says she has checked the exit, and it does not open, so the only way of escape is by hunting the boss. She claims she tried to attack the core that our hero attacked, but it didn't work, however. Kang was oblivious to the situation. He asserts they cannot break it, and being the first time he sees this, it could be a hidden pattern that occurs under special conditions. Kang says that anything they do is too much for their current levels, and says that maybe it's better to research a way to be hit suffering the least pain possible, but Sia does not accept this. While Kang tried to convince her that they were lost, she does not listen, and says with a smile on her face that if he doesn't know, they have to find out, and even if they fail, it's better to accept the challenge. Kang tries to explain to Sia about the level difference, but the girl says that adding her level to his, they are at level 80. The hero asserts that this makes no sense, and Sia insists they work together because they will surely find a way. She runs towards the battle and tells the hero to accompany her because she will be waiting in his room. Kang's brother says he heard that he gave up. He warns that their mother is crying and asks what they should do if he does this kind of thing out of nowhere. Bending down beside him, the brother asks if Kang remembers when they were young and the boy beat up the bullies. He says that at that time he was bigger, so they couldn't do anything, but this was not the case now. The brother says that Kang is in terrible condition, saying he is not good at studying and that the only thing he knows how to do is play. Kang then gets up from the bed angrily, asking what he is trying to say. His brother tells him to look at the people around him. He doesn't know what's happening but asks that at least he tells someone he trusts. Kang was irritated by the comments, but his brother concludes as he leaves the room that there are many things he cannot handle alone, and finishes asking Kang to come out and eat because their mother made a stew, and they will be waiting. A gust of wind. A strong attack is launched, hitting the golem squarely and causing considerable damage. But in the end, Sia reached her limit. The golem then delivers a blow that would be fatal in her direction, but Kang saves her, causing the golem to miss the attack. Sia is impressed to be saved, and the hero thanks her for buying time. He announces that he has fully recovered his HP and stamina, agreeing with Sia because since they will die anyway, they should at least fight. Kang affirms that now it's all or nothing, and the golem comes at them with its giant hand. Kang fills with strength, and delivers an attack that cuts off the boss's finger. Then he dodges an attack. Thinking it worked, Kang considers that the pickaxe might be its weak point, because according to the system, the pickaxe has no attack power. He delivers another attack, but realizes that now it's not working, wondering if it's a bug. However, he believes it's not and questions the condition to cause damage with that tool. Sia warns the hero to look up. An attack from the boss was about to hit him. Suddenly, blue lines are visualized on the golem's arm, and Kang remembers. His master had informed that ores are made of various different types of materials combined, and that even if they become one due to high pressure, there are still gaps between the materials. If he can hit the gaps precisely, he can extract something incredible. The pickaxe glows with strong blue rays, and the hero strikes the golem with a powerful blow, causing the boss's arm to explode. Proud of himself, the hero says he finally succeeded. He found the weak point. Extremely irritated, a monster tries to grab Kang, but the mining skill is used, destroying another limb of the boss, causing the golem to scream in rage and despair. The system notifies that he was successful in mining, and Sia watches from afar, finding it all incredible, for he defeated a boss with a production skill. After those attacks, the golem was immobilized due to the partial destruction of its body, and in light of this, Kang places his pickaxe against the monster, finishing what he had started. Finally, the system informs that Sia and Zig's group defeated the furious giant stone golem. The hero had not realized before because it was something he had to focus on a lot. The line skill can also be used for mining. Anyway, he is happy that he managed to hunt the boss. Sia jumps on Kang and asks how he managed to defeat the boss with a production skill. The hero says it's a trade secret, but she insists she really wants to know. As they are teleported out, he states he cannot easily reveal it. Thus, they concluded the dungeon. Amid strange structures with tubes containing green liquids, our heroes materialize. Sia asks what place this is where they are, and Kang says it must be the reward room. Or at least it should be. Sia speculates that they are in a place where monsters are created. The hero then questions if they are in the production room of the rumors of the Deborah dungeon. Kang thinks it's his first time there, and Sia calls his attention because she found a chest. The hero gets excited, believing that it really was a reward room. Sia finds the eagle glasses in the chest, and it increases her precision, range, and dexterity. Kang affirms it's a rare item and asks her to show it, but Sia denies, stating that it is hers. In the end, the hero accepts because he found another chest, lifting it up with excitement. But upon opening, it was just a common artifact. The witch's gloves increase defense and magical power by 3 points, and the hero thinks it's better than nothing. The next item to be found was the Guardian's blueprint. Upon completing the blueprint, the hero will learn to make the black iron that the witch tried to create. Kang gets excited about the possibility of building a robot, but seeing the construction prerequisites, he comes back to reality and gives up. The last item in the chest was Carwin's manual. The hero sees records left by the man who defeated the witch Deborah. If a blacksmith reads it, he can learn the skills grain and arm break. The prerequisites for the grain skill had already been met by Kang, while the arm break skill depended only on proficiency in the first skill to be unlocked. Kang is surprised that he can use the grain skill immediately. He starts reading the book, but doesn't understand what he will use it for. However, the story of the hero connects with Kang's. Having defeated the golem in the same way, the hero elevated his ability to see grains in all materials and created one to expand it even further. While he trained the grain skill, he managed to learn to destroy ores and armaments, learning another skill, arm break. Kang reads all this, finding it incredible. The hero of the book continues saying that his fight against Deborah is not over, and she will return one day bringing a powerful army. This is the reason why he did not destroy the witch's cave, leaving it as it is. In the end, the hero hopes his successors can learn to fight against the witch's army. Kang, intrigued by the story, found it interesting that a blacksmith could learn Carwin's skill. Sia asks if Kang didn't like his reward, but he affirms he did. In fact, he was very excited because he learned a hidden skill. Sia then calls Kang to leave there. Outside, Sia comments that she spent a long time without seeing the sky, and Kang says that a day has passed in the game and 8 hours in real life. She then says she must leave immediately, and Kang fumbles, wanting to say something to her. Sia then takes the initiative and asks how old Kang is, who, upon answering 20, confirms she is the same age as her. Sia smiles and asks that from that moment on they become friends. With her hand extended towards the hero, she questions if he will not greet her, and they finally shake hands. Sia warns that she added him on social networks and will contact him when the test period is over. Kang, confused, asks about what she said, and she explains that she will have to take some tests, so she wanted to finish the dungeon before and ends by saying she will return in 2 weeks. After hearing all this, the story Kang had invented in his head about her crumbles, and Sia hits Kang, asking why he is so upset. A hit that fractures our hero's cervical spine. Sia comments that if someone saw them, they would think they would not meet, but she makes it clear that it will only be 2 weeks. An system message informs that Zig died and Sia was the murderer, which leaves her desperate. Kang asks if she could pick up his items, but he despairs when he sees that his name is red, and in contrast, the hero asks her to calm down. Sia questions what will happen if the effect does not pass, and Kang asks her to pick up his items first. Someone announces a delivery, and inside his house, Kang disconnects from the game. He thinks it's been a week since the hunt for the stone golem. Since then, he has perfected his skills, and his creation and repair skills when using grain had a 100% success rate. In addition, the quality of the equipment increased impressively. And then in another week, he had already become a famous master blacksmith in Balden. In his new capsule, Kang confirms that the sensation in the game feels much more real than before. Suddenly, someone catches his attention. They were numerous customers asking for their items to be repaired. But Kang explains to the players that he has a mission to do, so he will not be able to work. This causes the players to start a commotion because everyone wanted at least their equipment to be restored. A blonde then approaches the confusion, saying that a king slime appeared on the plains of Urk and comments that he has to go there immediately. The players who are nearby are interested in the matter because it was a super rare mob. Quickly, everyone leaves together towards the plain, leaving only Kang and the blonde at the location. Kang thinks that the king slime does not appear in these plains, and the blonde in turn says that they can finally talk in peace, warning that he came to visit. In the classroom, our protagonist studies in casual clothes. He writes things quickly in his notebook, while someone looks at him believing his speed was superhuman. A month has passed and Sparks was hacked. Even with his fame, he had not found any clues about the delinquent. With high-level equipment, it was easy to level up, but now Kang had to seek other methods, finding thus the commercial route of the Northern Arc. Kang thinks that in addition to having been successful in clearing the route, a level change in the game will also happen. He gets excited thinking about how interesting these missions will be. A recent quest was published by the King of Barkas, It involved sending a delegation to establish a trade route with the country of Nosark. The mission was requested by King himself, hence there are rumors that one can expect great rewards. Nosark is the home of the dwarves who originated the blacksmiths, and this is an opportunity the hero cannot miss. He thinks the problem is that his classification and level in the system are low. While thinking, he startles the man from before with his capabilities again. Someone says they must introduce themselves, and identifies as Dylan, manager of the Walden branch of the Golden Rush Merchant Syndicate. Dylan explains that he is there to recruit Kang, and affirms he will treat him very well. Kang, however, was thinking a lot about the matter. In turn, Dylan asks if the hero didn't hear him, and he asks for it to be repeated. The branch manager then gets stressed, believing he is being ignored. Kang warns he is not interested in guilds, and Dylan believes the blacksmith does not know his. But Kang warns he already knows it, and that it is a guild that always comes in second place. This stresses Dylan, who explains that second place is also incredible. He states it's a pity they are in second place, and that they will soon return to first. Reiterating the offer, he cites a few more benefits, but the hero denies. Dylan did not expect that response. Kang explains that even if he joins the guild, he will continue to be a blacksmith who will be exploited. The hero then questions if they would treat him differently. Dylan thinks about what was said, and proposes that Kang become an associate member. He explains that he usually suggests this only to high-level users, explaining that it's enough to register on the website and keep in touch with him periodically. There will be no obligation as a formal member, and every service provided will be rewarded. If Kang likes the guild, he can join, and if he doesn't like it, he has the right to leave after half a year. The hero begins to think about the proposal. It was a very difficult choice to make, but in the end he accepts the conditions. However, he asks Dylan if he could do him a favor in return, which piques his curiosity. In the midst of the forest, a carriage passes by. Some comments question the decision to hire a novice as an associate member. Dylan then responds that it will be an experience. The manager says he had seen someone similar to our hero. The name of this player was Giriam, the top one of the server, the greatest master whose unique pieces can be traded for millions. The man in the conversation says he will observe the process and asks about a certain amount of gold that disappeared. Dylan understands what it's about and explains that he withdrew 90,000 because the blacksmith asked for something else as a reward. A poster of the exploration group revealed the accepted members. Several people gathered to look at it, as did Kang. On the poster, the hero's player name was written, making Kang fill with happiness. But he thinks that time is limited, and besides, the guilds prepared gold as a participation prize, wondering if the merchant would demand something strange for him in the future. He then stretches and prepares for the mission. In the east of Baldwin is Joe's bakery. Tempest of Guilford, considered the strongest of the mercenaries, was there waiting in line at the bakery. The attendant calls for the next customer, and Tempest goes to get his order. However, he faces a cruel reality, seeing that his honey biscuits had run out. The attendant explains that the man behind him had just bought them all. The leader of the mercenaries then turns furiously, grabbing the collar of the person, giving a bit scolding to the same for having taken everything in stock. But this person was Kang, the blacksmith who destroyed his sword. Realizing that it was the crafty blacksmith who deceived him, Kang is startled, seeming to recognize Tempest. But in reality, he does not remember who he is and asks his name. This leaves Tempest totally disconcerted, getting even more irritated and calling him a scoundrel, reminding Kang that he had broken his precious weapon. He then goes for the hero, who dodges. Suddenly, Mr. Guilford ends his session in the game, leaving Kang confused because he disappeared suddenly. The members of the mercenaries group are also confused, questioning where their leader went. Tempest wakes up in his house getting scolded by his wife for not having done some tasks. He claims there was no need to turn off the power, and she gets even more irritated. The man asks his wife not to bend his elbow that way. With his leg trapped, he asks her to spare him this time. In another room, his daughter heard her father's screams, getting stressed because she had asked them to be quiet so she could study. She then tries to calm down, thinking she will try to keep it that way for another week. In the exploration of the portal of Barcus Castle, a man calls his colleague to look at something. It was the Red Tiger mercenaries who were there. The men wonder if the mission will not be too easy with them there. The mercenary asks that everyone in his guild carefully look for that blacksmith. He thinks that judging by the amount of food he bought, he must also be participating. A woman yells, saying she is selling items necessary for the mission at a low price. Catching the hero's attention, she asks if he has ever been ambushed by a monster while walking. And when he was about to answer, she affirms that obviously yes, saying that at that time he must have thought it would be good to have a survival skill, which makes the hero agree with some suspicion. She then announces she's selling a magic ring that allows teleportation for just 10,000 gold. Kang becomes extremely excited upon hearing the price, but still thinks that 10,000 is a lot of money. He then wonders if it is really necessary, and realizes that his body reacted first and went to buy it. The woman thanks him, and he thinks that anyway he could resell it and make a profit. However, upon examining it, he realizes something. It was a teleport ring that destroys itself after use. The woman comments that the day's sales were great, and as expected, there are many fools in Baldwin, so it's easy to make money. Kang approaches the woman, calling her a swindler, With nerves on edge, he asks for his money back. She asks what the problem is since the ring has the power she promised. Kang calls her a swindler and says that is not what was promised, and the merchant says her name is not Swindler. The two start to argue and a soldier arrives asking what is happening. They will be departing soon, so they should stop fighting and get ready. Kang tries to warn about the swindler, but he is thrown to the ground while the woman whispers some words to the soldier. She hands over some money, bribing him, and the soldier agrees to be part of this corrupt scheme, pointing his weapon at Kang and accusing him of having stolen from the woman. The hero tries to explain that it was she who robbed him, but the soldier tells him to be quiet, asking him to apologize, and as punishment, Kang must pull his cart. He was appalled by such injustice, and Lygus the merchant begins to laugh mockingly in the background. The expedition then begins, and our hero was indeed forced to pull the swindler's cart. On the outskirts of the expedition, a hooded man with an eagle on his arm seemed to be plotting something. He places a note in the eagle's claw, which flies off promptly, going to the treasury of the kingdom of Brodin. The eagle finishes its service, and a man says what he feared happened. The kingdom of Barkas has started the expedition, and this could be problematic because half of his country's finances come from intermediary trade. However, they have a friendly relationship with this kingdom, so they cannot openly prevent them. That man asks if it was understood what he meant by that, and the masked man affirms that yes, revealing himself as Kira, an assassin ranked 89. In the midst of a forest, lying on the ground, the hero wonders how things got to this point. The woman calls him a slave and says he needs to set up the tent, which irritates Kang. She says she needs to disconnect for a moment, so he needs to set up the tent and find food, asking if he understood, leaving the hero quite irritated. The protagonist says she is pushing it, asking if she really considers him a slave. The merchant then calls the guards, and the hero decides to get back to work. He says that since the terrain is flat, this will be a perfect place to set up the tent. The woman comments that he should always behave like this, asking him to get everything ready. The woman disconnects and Kang starts to cry, making him scream in frustration at the situation he is in. While eating, he thinks he is suffering a lot after being caught by this swindler, and someone catches his attention. A man says he heard he is the best at repair in Baldin, asking him to fix a piece of equipment for him. Kang finds it strange out of nowhere. The man asks if he is not confident in his abilities while thinking he will drag him to his leader. Kang finds it annoying as he was eating, but he activates his grain skill. After the repair, the mercenary's weapon was perfect. While sleeping in a hammock, the members observe his work, commenting that he is so good it's strange to believe he destroyed the leader's sword. Kang asks him to leave now that he is finished since he is in the middle of reading, calling him old. The man gets angry at the adjective and starts criticizing the blacksmith for breaking the sword that was repaired. Kang asks what he is saying since he was praising him just now. He says he is not an old man, and if Kang does not follow him, he will beat him up. This makes Kang remember. He asks if they are the old men he met at the bakery, and if they are acting like this because he bought the biscuits. The man says the red tiger would never provoke him over something so small, but that's what they were doing. But the hero says it doesn't matter, and since he wanted someone to unload his anger on, he calls him to fight. As expected, the hero was easily subdued, being taken to the leader of the mercenaries. Kang yells that forming groups is cheating, and the leader of the mercenaries says that if he apologizes sincerely, he will overlook things. But the hero tells him to go to that place because he had the right to buy the biscuits. Tempest says he is not talking about the biscuits, and Kang asks what it is because he never harmed anyone, which makes the leader get angry. He then thinks that this will not work, releasing the hero and making him confused. But suddenly, Tempest started to fight with Kang, delivering a powerful blow and exploding everything around him. The hero thinks this could not be happening. The leader of the mercenaries was holding an event item with an attack power of 1 called the Love Stick. Tempest then says he will teach our protagonist some good manners, saying it's time for discipline lessons. He launches another powerful attack that cuts everything around. Kang confronts him, saying that this is not a lesson at all. This is just unloading anger on someone. While speaking, a blow hits him squarely, causing him to be defeated on the ground. The leader of the mercenaries asks if that's all he has, and then says he will set a condition that if he can touch him, he will let him go. On the ground, the hero calls him a stubborn boomer. Kang says the mercenary must think he will never be hit by someone like him. Noticing that people look with contempt, he advances the battle with Tempest. They exchange several blows, and the hero ends up being pushed back. Tempest thinks that for a beginner, he is not bad. However, his talent is not so great that it can overcome the level difference. The love stick clashes with Kang's sword, but the hero screams in fury and destroys the weapon of the leader of the mercenaries. Arm break is a skill that destroys ores or armaments targeting the gaps in the material. The prerequisite cell is to train the grain skill to level 7. The hero thinks today is the day, and his eyes shine. He looks attentively at the system and realizes that the grain skill has evolved to rank 7. Now he can finally learn the arm break skill. He then decides to test the skill against the leader of the mercenaries, breaking his weapon and surprising him. The hero thinks that even though he is a ranker, it must be the first time he sees such a skill. He holds him on his shoulder, using another skill, the butt head, which accidentally makes him kiss the mercenary on the mouth, leaving everyone at the scene in disbelief. The leader of the mercenaries says he will kill the hero, and Kang thinks that was his first kiss. All the group members hold their leader back as he tries to go after Kang, and one of the mercenaries approaches, giving Kang a superior elixir as a gift. The man is surprised that the hero managed to land a hit on their leader and asks about the skill. He comments it's the first time he sees a skill that destroys weapons, and Kang says he can't say anything about it. The man asks if he already has a guild and offers Kang a place in the mercenary company. Kang says that's a shameless offer to make after they beat him up. The man says they weren't mature about it, but the hero broke the leader's sword and ran away. Kang, confused, asserts that he has never broken anyone's weapon during a repair until now. But he remembers what happened. He had broken the sword of the leader of the mercenaries. So the two shake hands, and the hero accepts that they are even now, calling the man older brother. Tempest asks what permission Kang has to call his colleague with such intimacy, calling him a kid. In turn, Kang apologizes for the repair incident, and Tempest gets angry, saying that's not the problem, releasing a thunderous scream into the wind. While eating a soup, someone says it's horrible. His colleague tells him to go to the settings and lower the taste because without resistance items, they need to eat this. The merchant appears behind the men, commenting that they must have used all their consumables. She then offers a golden apple to the men, and they are surprised because it's something very precious. She says she's selling it for just 1,000 gold, and the men offer to buy several of them, forming a line to see who buys first. Later, she boasts about having made good money that day, and Kang asks if she wants to go that far for money, calling her cruel. Lygia says everything happens for money, and that one should focus on their inventory and bank account. She asks Kang to take care of the rest, and when he finishes doing that, she won't give him any more orders. The hero doesn't understand why she is so obsessed with money. While painting an apple gold, he is happy to finish his work, and talks to the apple, saying it will be his companion until death. Suddenly, a shuriken approaches towards Kang, hitting the apple in the hero's hand, who notices the attack. Tempest announces they are being attacked and asks the fighters to assume defensive positions. Several members of the mercenaries group were attacked, and that hooded figure from before appears in midair. Quickly, the leader of the mercenaries cuts him in half, but it wasn't his real body, it was a user's death effect. A blade then approaches Tempest's neck, but Kang uses his arm break skill and defends him, saying the old man owes him his life. Tempest in turn says that kind of attack wouldn't even scratch him, but he thinks the assassin's stealth is at a level he couldn't detect. Tempest points his weapon at the assassin and asks who he is. The man smiles and says he is the assassin who received the title of first class. The man who leads the Black Crescent Moon. Everyone at the location seems to recognize him because it's a famous contracting guild. The assassin then confirms he is Kira. Then the exploration team's attack mission is presented. Players must overcome the assassin's interference attempts and reach the Arc of the North. In turn, the hunters are surprised because that was a rancor. That battle stance was of an assassin and had no openings, stating that everyone would die. But the assassin says he was not there to kill everyone. His goal was to keep everyone there and obtain the title of Shadow Patriot, and as long as they gave up, they could end it. One of the hunters didn't want to accept because they spent a lot of time on the mission asking if they would reimburse their investment. The man smiles, saying he was mistaken. At the same instant, the guy receives an arrow shot. Continuing, Kira responds that he was not there to negotiate as it was just a formality. At that moment, they were surrounded by his followers, and if they did not give up the mission, they would die. Guilford thinks that he felt their presence, but it was not hundreds, so it could be a bluff. Realizing that one of his mercenaries was behind, the man gives instructions to him, making hand signals. And when they were about to execute the plan, Zig appears questioning what kind of assassin he was, because if he was a high-level ranker, he should fight respectably, calling him a coward. A stressed man says that Zig was just lucky when he destroyed his weapon, so he shouldn't act that way, giving the order for his subordinates to kill him. A magic goes towards the protagonist, but he ends up defending. Soon after, several kunes go towards the mercenaries. Guilford gives an order to the mage, who uses an ice magic to defend. Kira, in turn, says not to leave anyone alive. However, Guilford was already in front of him, stating that they would be annihilated, using his berserk ability and attacking the guy with his sword, but he dodges. Kira states that if he were a bit faster, he would have won. The system informs that the stats were low, so berserk mode would be deactivated. The effects of Hydra's blood were activated. Due to its effects, all attributes were halved. Zig is sure that he is a genius. Just before the attack hit him, he quickly opened the inventory, equipping the torso armor that had great defense at the cost of limiting his movements, saying that the Red Tiger was handling everything alone, so he should help. Arriving at the scene, Zig is surprised because they were losing. Soon after, blood starts to drip from his mouth and the system informs that the Hydra's blood effect was activated. Hearing the names, Zig remembers it was a possible item dropped from the boss in the Cadria dungeon, a powerful poison capable of reducing health and attributes by half, questioning if they poisoned his breakfast coffee. At the same instant, a hooded figure appears. Guilford continued fighting against Kira. Seeing his skills, the guy thinks that he was at that level even poisoned, besides that his attacks were not working, suggesting evacuating the NPCs because he was at a disadvantage. Guilford starts to flee, but Kira goes after him. The protagonist, fleeing from the hooded figures, thinks that he avoided all the attacks but would be caught, so he should hide. That he would need to reach the forest. Meanwhile, the girl who had stolen from the protagonist was fleeing the scene. Kira, in turn, was collecting items from his victims, telling them to get ready because when the tracking team returned, it would pursue them. Hearing a sound among the bushes, he questions what it was. One of his subordinates appears informing that the tracking team had returned and they were heading towards Canyon. The man is pleased, cutting a tree in half, announcing they would go to the city of Canyon. Meanwhile, the girl was still observing them from the bushes, thinking that the Crescent Moon was a high-ranked guild and half the team was already dead. And if they were attacked again, it would end in another defeat, so she should warn the exploration team. The girl is paralyzed. Noticing that a giant monster was coming towards her, desperate, she starts to run, asking why an ogre like that was there. Then the cart hits a stone. Consequently, the girl falls. With a terrifying look, the ogre comes towards her. A flashback of her life appears, receiving money and thinking she could be able to pay. Then she receives a call from her father. Looking at her phone, she notices the hospital payment notification, saying that it was all right because money comes back all the time. In the present, the girl says that she worked hard saving that money for the mission, starting to throw stones at the ogre, asking it to die. Then an explosion happens, and the ogre simply disappears. Zig appears saying he finally caught it. Looking to the side, the protagonist notices the girl. Questioning why she was there 30 minutes earlier, two hooded figures were looking for where they were. Hearing a noise, they advanced towards the forest. Meanwhile, Zig was hiding among the trees, saying he finally caught up with them. But first, he needed the advanced antidote. At the same instant, a monster appears behind him. The system warns that it was a yellow ogre, a rare monster that only appeared in the mountains. Attacking Zig, the boy says it had high attack power, so it would be better not to engage in combat. However, no matter how strong the attack is, it was useless if it didn't hit, cutting the monster. However, it still had not died. The protagonist starts a sequence of attacks on the monster. Returning to the present, Zig drank an antidote capable of recovering all status ailments. Disbelieving, the girl asks if he really had defeated that ogre. Affirming, Zig questions if she couldn't see that icon that could only be obtained after defeating it. Even so, she doesn't believe because that guy was just a blacksmith. But it had worked because she was worried about dealing with that monster alone, telling the protagonist to get to work, because he also wanted to complete some missions, mentioning that he had a plan to clear the Crescent Moon mission. Sometime later, one of the mercenaries tells Guilford that they spotted a bridge, so they were almost there. However, for the captain, it was not yet the time, drawing his sword, almost hitting one of the hooded figures. Kira, in turn, says that it was incredible, because he thought he had completely hidden his presence, asking how Guilford knew. The captain says that it was the experience of an adult calling him a child, making Kira furious, starting to throw several spells at the mercenaries. However, Guilford manages to defend all of them, giving the signal to one of his companions. When he was about to use his ice magic, the guy is decapitated by one of the hooded figures, making Guilford furious, going after Kira. With the captain defeated on the ground, Kira mentions that his strength was not as great as his reputation. Noticing something coming his way, Kira asks what that was. Then Zig appears, carrying something in a cart, saying that it was a gift. Then Kira takes his dagger, slicing the cart, saying that Zig had escaped by luck but had come back alone, questioning if the boy wanted to die. Noticing his soaked clothes, the man asks what that smell was. The protagonist, in turn, says that it was a bonus for a Molotov at him. Before all that, the girl who had stolen from Zig shows those barrels on the cart, saying that she took them because the dwarves loved them, showing the protagonist how strong that substance was. And if they could throw it at Kira and then ignite it, they could end up defeating him. Even if he was a ranker, he would definitely die, asking if that wasn't a good plan. But the boy questions what they would do with the rest of the assassins. The girl replies that they could blow them up along with Kira. However, there was no way everyone would stay together, and that wasn't an issue that could be resolved by defeating the leader. So the girl questions what they should do and if he had another idea. Zig asks her to think a bit, informing that the hooded figures would hide somewhere before attacking. In other words, they should just go to the places where they would hide first. Returning to the present, the girl says that it had really worked as Zig had said. Meanwhile, the protagonist watched the hooded figures fall and being happy because it had really worked. The more he knew his ability, the more he liked it, saying he should investigate more after the mission. Then someone among the flames questions where the boy was going. It was Kira advancing towards the protagonist. Dodging his attack, Zig is surprised because Kira was still alive, affirming that all rankers were monsters. Kira, in turn, says he would make him regret it, because now he was really irritated. Meanwhile, Guilford was still on the bridge, saying he didn't know the cause of the explosions, but thanks to that, he wasn't dead, warning they should flee before the Crescent Moon returns. Then that girl appears, telling the captain to cross the bridge before the Crescent Moon arrives. Guilford questions if it was her who caused the explosions. The girl confirms, mentioning that it was done by her and a blacksmith named Zig. One of the mercenaries warns that he should go, but the captain wanted to stay and wait for the protagonist, mentioning that the blacksmith had saved him twice and that it was not his intention to be in debt. Meanwhile, Zig uses his arm-breaking ability. Kira, in turn, asks if the protagonist thought he could go against him with just those tricks. Zig mentions that he couldn't even stand up because of his injuries in the fire, and at the same instant, he receives an attack. The man warns that it was an ability called Afterimage Assault, questioning if the boy would keep avoiding these useless attacks, saying he would crush him. Then Zig gives a signal. Kira questions if they still had more bombs. Looking back, he sees the protagonist fleeing, saying he had really fallen for that. Approaching the boy, Kira finds a cave, saying he would kill him. When entering the cave, several cookies go towards him. It was just a distraction because at the same instant, Zig appears, hitting Kira. However, it was a decoy ability that summoned a clone, attacking the protagonist from behind, mentioning that the boy was very strong, but it was all over for him. When he looks at his foot, he notices a vine wrapped around it. Zig, in turn, says that there were no mobs in that cave, but a plant was interesting. That was a vine that trapped anything and would disappear after a period of restriction. The protagonist says that Kira should have watched where he stepped, making the guy irritated, questioning what he could do in 10 seconds. But the boy mentions that he didn't need any special ability, because he had killed a golem with just that weapon. The man laughs because his secret weapon was that. Then the protagonist advances, telling him to see if that was just a pickaxe. And when he goes to attack, he ends up missing, saying that the boy couldn't even hit a stationary target. But for Zig, the man was not his target, because he wanted to attack right there, mentioning that he had destroyed that core and soon the cave would collapse. The guy says that it was impossible because it wouldn't collapse with just that. At the same instant, the cave starts to tremble, leaving Kira surprised because he had never heard of an ability like that, supposing that it could be a mind-manipulating ability, but he was just a blacksmith. In other words, the cave was really collapsing. Then he starts to flee. However, he was still restricted by the vine on his foot. The system informs that the mission had failed because all the assassins were dead and a penalty would be given. Returning to Guilford, one of the mercenaries asks to leave because Zig should already be dead. Guilford, in turn, says that Zig wouldn't die so easily. Among the mountains, the protagonist appears, mentioning that he was still alive. The mercenaries are surprised because he survived without any serious injuries. However, Zig mentions that he would already be dead without that ring, because when he was in the cave, he used it to escape quickly, saying that he still thought the ring was bad because of the price, but it still saved him. The girl is surprised, thinking that it was a useless item, but he still managed to survive, affirming that it was as he said and it really helped him, asking the boy to thank her. Guilford mentions that he was impressive because he had defeated Kira. Zig affirms that he did that, unlike him who only talked, making the guy angry. Then the protagonist announces that they should go to the northern arcs. Sometime later, the mercenaries observe a giant building, stating that the negotiation group was in that place. The system informs that the mission had been completed. Out of 80 adventurers, 28 survived and those people receive a gift. Then the gate opens. The system informs that Zig had gained experience and prestige, thus increasing his level, and now he could repair C-rank equipment, and he had received a shield from King Barkas, a shield that could block any attack once a day. A group of people observed Zig, mentioning that it had already been a month since the character was created. That character was controlled by a former player named Bartz, and since the creation, he had shown incredible gameplay. He even defeated a giant stone golem and was currently in the north. His team believed that there was a high possibility that person would add a new event. One of the men questions why they should delay the update. The other guy mentions that the event would bring new changes and the update time would confuse the players. But the man asks if the director thought that really made sense, because it took 3 years to unlock the giant golem mode, and he believed that a low-level blacksmith would activate the event, questioning if he would take responsibility. Then the director affirms that if it fell below performance, he would take responsibility, apologizing for being late. The other guy asks what he meant by taking responsibility. Seokjin says that it was exactly what he had said, mentioning that they would delay the update, but the man asks if he thought a blacksmith could activate the event. Then the director says that it was possible and wanted to add more things in the update, asking them to wait until it was finished. Shoving his ideas, Seokjin asks what they thought of it, and if it went beyond the expected performance, he would take full responsibility. The other guy mentions that developing all that would take 2 years. However, the director announces that most of the work was completed while he was on vacation, leaving the man surprised because he did it alone. Seokjin says that it was exciting because Arpedia would change in the future. Returning to the protagonist, the boy was sleeping, dreaming that he had caught the hacker. Meanwhile, with disgust, his brother observed. Returning to the room, his parents ask if Zig was okay. Then the brother announces that he had played all night and was now sleeping. His mother gets furious because Zig had said he was studying, but his father says that it was a good idea for the boy to do something on his own because when he thinks about the past, there were only regrets. Then the mother asks what they would do if Zig could make a living. The father says he would give him study materials, affirming that he just wanted to see him happy, because when the boy was fighting, he couldn't do anything. so he thought it was better to let him do what he wanted. Meanwhile, the protagonist heard everything in the background. Then his brother mentions that he would skip the academy, making the mother furious, saying he wouldn't skip. Sometime later, the protagonist was sitting on a sidewalk, recalling what he had heard from his parents, saying that even his parents worried about unnecessary things, but he was fine. Sometime later, Zig questions what that was, because there was a rat in his school food, leaving those beside him surprised. The protagonist takes his cell phone, thinking he should posting that photo on the internet. Sometime later, a man arrives in his classroom asking if Zig studied there. Meanwhile, the student said the guy was famous for fighting since high school. Then the boy approaches the protagonist, questioning if that was Zig, pulling his head to wake him up. But the boy was still sleepy, and then takes a punch. Sometime later, one of the students asks what was wrong with Zig, but the boy says he just tripped. The guy questions if he didn't want to go to the hospital, but with a bruised face, Zig says he was fine. And after all that, his school life became hell because that guy always looked for him. Because of that, he distanced himself from his friends, becoming completely isolated. Every day it repeated. The boy says he was really doing that, but the other guy says he can't hear well, asking what he was mumbling. Then the protagonist shouts, questioning what he had done. The group starts laughing, mentioning they were scared. At the same instant, another person arrives at the scene. That boy was named Hyen, who was the council president. Seeing that guy, Zig remembers he was first in everything. Hyen, answering the boy's previous question, says he would tell the reason, answering that he did it just because he liked him. Returning to the present, Zig asks them to face him now because he would defeat them with just his skills. Then a paper hits his face, saying he couldn't see anything. At the same instant, he bumps into a man. The guy asks if he shouldn't apologize for bumping into him. Apologizing, Zig is surprised, recognizing the guy in front of him. Seeing that the protagonist was silent, the man grabs his shirt collar, questioning if he wasn't hearing him. Desperate, Zig asks why he was there. Then the man receives a call, saying he was lucky, asking him to be careful next time. Sometime later, a person was talking with the previous guy about the game Arpeia, mentioning that the Northern Arc had started recently, and because of that, Broaden Castle's finances were difficult. Originally, they talked about the remuneration being very low among the employees. Asking Jung what his response would be, leaving him no choice, the man accepts. The next day, the protagonist was in front of a building, thinking that everything would be okay. Now he wasn't afraid of people or going out anymore. Recalling the previous night, he thinks he should get stronger, so he would increase his physical and mental strength. Entering the building, Zig tries to say something, but when he looks inside the building, he sees several people piled up, becoming desperate with that situation. Leaving the place, the boy says he was unemployed, meaning he wouldn't have money to pay. Then the man asks if he was there to sign up. Zig says no, mentioning he had entered the wrong place. When he was about to leave, he bumps into someone. Sometime later, the protagonist was sitting, questioning if that group were the mercenaries from the game. Guilford asks if the protagonist practices any martial art, but the boy says no because he just wanted to learn some exercises. Then the guy asks if he was there to register, but Zig says again that he wasn't because he was unemployed. However, the other guy mentions that it wasn't a problem. Zig, in turn, accepts, saying he had nothing to lose. Asking the protagonist's real name, he responds that his name was Kang. Hearing that name, Guilford says he had heard it somewhere. Recalling that the supermarket owner's son was also named Kang and was a childhood friend of his daughter, saying that it brought back memories of the past. Nervous, the protagonist asks his name. Then the guy asks if he hadn't said it before, answering that his name was Taesu. Zig asks the name of his daughter, making Guilford curious, questioning why he wanted to know. The boy mentions that it had been a long time. Guilford, confused, says he didn't know what he was talking about. Then he remembers that he was the friend of his daughter. Sometime later, the system informs that his energy was running out, and his life was gradually decreasing. Remembering what had happened when he was with Guilford, the boy mentions that after training he barely managed to enter Arpeia, because his body was extremely exhausted, mentioning that he had leveled up by accepting dwarf missions and had worked hard thinking he could learn hidden skills. However, the dwarves did not accept, questioning if Zig thought they would help him for free, and they already knew he just wanted to steal their secrets. The system informs that his stamina was low, asking him to consume food. Entering a shop, Zig is surprised because everything was very expensive. The dwarf mentions that this shop had the cheapest prices in the city. The boy thinks that the city still hadn't stabilized the prices, saying he would just take a potato. But when he looks at his inventory, he realizes he had no money, remembering that he had spent it all requesting iron during the gold rush, questioning if the dwarf could accept less money for it. Then at the same moment, Zig is taken outside. In the present, the protagonist was lying on the ground, thinking he hadn't eaten anything, questioning if he would die that way. However, he couldn't die and had no choice but to sell that shield, feeling sad because it had an incredible ability. Then a person greets him, mentioning that the shield looked good and asking if he wanted to sell it. Zig thinks a customer had already appeared, questioning if luck was on his side. Then the dwarf makes his offer of 5 million to buy the shield, leaving the boy surprised by so much money, where he ends up accepting the offer. But when he receives the money, the protagonist is confused, and when he looks at the dwarf, he was already fleeing. Knocking on a door, Zig asks the dwarf to come out. However, he says he would stay there forever. Inside the house, the dwarf dismantles the shield, thinking that the final jewel was finally extracted, questioning what the problem was. Sometime later, the protagonist was eating, thinking if that dwarf thought he would really give up, mentioning that he was ready to become an assassin. Observing those people in the background, he notices they were young dwarves, where they started painting the dwarf's house wall, questioning why they were doing that. Although they were children, Zig didn't like it, trying to stop the kids. But they mentioned they weren't doing anything. Then the protagonist grabs the brush from the child's hand, saying he wanted to teach them to do it correctly, starting to completely paint the dwarf's wall. Meanwhile, the man continued working on the shield, saying it couldn't be helped, questioning if he should go to the ice palace. However, he didn't like fighting, saying it would be good to have someone to do it for him. When he opens the door, Zig sees the dwarf, saying he finally decided to come out, asking the man to return his shield, because he had suffered a lot to get it. However, the dwarf remains silent, asking if he was the one who drew all that, but the boy says it was all a joke compared to what he did. Observing Zig's paintings, the dwarf thinks it was incredible. Seeing his clothes, he surely was a blacksmith. Then he says he would return his shield, asking to be let go. Handing the shield to the boy, Zig notices it was broken into pieces. The dwarf mentions he did a good job dismantling it, and now the protagonist could reassemble it. Zig, in turn, asks if the dwarf really had dismantled his shield, and the man affirms. Grabbing the dwarf's shoulder, the protagonist says it was incredible, questioning how he did it. Blacksmithing was known as a profession that only had crafting and repair. When making weapons with expensive materials, it was standard to make items with recipes, because it would be a waste if a bad weapon was made due to an error. Then you could recycle the materials to make weapons not listed in the recipe, and maybe create items with incredible abilities. Returning to the protagonist, the boy thinks he could keep changing the items he already had as he wished, so he needed to learn it, begging the dwarf to teach him. The dwarf, in turn, accepts, asking if the boy would be his disciple. Sometime later, the dwarf asks Zig to follow him, questioning if the boy knew Enduras, affirming and saying it was a legendary monster in the northeastern part of the Northern Arc. Besides, it loved jewels and accepted them as tributes. Then the dwarf mentions that his companions were bringing jewels and artifacts for that dragon. However, he was different because he would kill it and then get rich, showing what he had done for that ambitious plan, leaving Zig surprised when he sees an iron dragon, questioning if it moved. The dwarf, in turn, says it didn't because he wouldn't leave it there if it moved. Zig questions if it wasn't just a giant can, but the dwarf mentions that all the parts were completely balanced, starting to say various things about the machine. Meanwhile, the protagonist was not paying attention, questioning if he could make a weapon with that. Asking the boy to pay attention, he orders Zig to go to the Ice Palace. In the Ice Palace, a person was battling a monster. Then an archer appears, helping the boy. That was the protagonist's friend, asking if her brother was okay. The man says that it was indeed the dungeon's aftermath, as the rumors said. At the same moment, a lightning bolt strikes between the two, and the girl's brother asks what she was doing. Another girl appears, apologizing. The guy asks if she didn't do that on purpose, but the girl questions how a new dungeon had appeared. Saying that it was an opinion among the users, the man mentions that there were various theories. Meanwhile, the protagonist's friend remembers that 2 weeks had already passed, remembering she should have talked to Zig. Then a bloodied man appears, leaving the girl terrified, asking what was wrong with him. While they were healing him, the man notices a figure in the ice. Thinking it was a monster, the group prepares. Among the ice, a person says the fog was too thick to see. When he comes out of that fog, that man was Zig. Surprised when he sees Sia, questioning why she was there, remembering that the dwarf had mentioned the Ice Palace was a dungeon that appeared in Canyon 2 weeks ago. Showing a paper with images of the monsters that appeared, the protagonist says those were the wooden mobs from Deborah's dungeon. The dwarf affirms but says if you looked closely, they seemed different and that moved that tinkin. Deborah was a genius in magical engineering, and the heart of the wooden soldier she made produced very strong energy. It would have been impossible with just a regular soldier's heart, but if he could get an original one, he could make an energy source to move the dragon, affirming that it would be a trial, because if he wanted to be his apprentice, he should get 30 wooden hearts. In the present, Sia asks if Zig came because of the mission. The boy affirms, but says it was awful, and that he was having difficulties. Then the girl asks if Zig wanted to join her group, as she would help him too. Zig thinks that there were too many people and that would be a burden, but anyway, it wasn't his goal to clear the dungeon. So the other girl asks how they could use a blacksmith, making Sia furious, questioning if she was against it. And when Zig was about to say he was fine, the girl takes his hand, telling him to enter the dungeon. Sometime later, the group was battling the monsters. Together, they use an attack to defeat the monsters, where Zig ends up gathering all the hearts, completing the mission. Observing the group, the boy thinks that the connection between them was good, so they would easily clear the dungeon, but the only problem was that once the dungeon was discovered, it couldn't be cleared. Then the other girl tells him to help with something instead of just picking up items. But Sia mentions that Zig was just conserving energy, and if he showed his skills, she would be surprised. Questioning the boy if she was right. Zig, in turn, affirms, thinking he would have to do it. The other guy asks them to stop talking because the boss's room was just ahead, and everyone should take care of their skills and items. Entering the room, the other girl is happy because she was the first to arrive. Looking ahead, she sees someone crying, and when she was about to ask if she was okay, the other guy tries to stop her. But it was too late, because actually that was a monster trying to turn the girl into stone. Medusa is surprised because she managed to avoid her attack, but anyway, humans were good at running away. However, there was still an adventurer there using her defense ability. Medusa tries to attack, saying that if her wish was to die, she would do it. Returning to the desperate girl, she mentions that it was very scary, and the other guy says that Medusa was the most unpleasant monster in that game. And there was a rumor in the communities that Medusa was a boss mob in that game, apologizing for not warning earlier. But the girl says it wasn't necessary because it only happened because she ran alone, affirming that they were in that situation because of her, with the protagonist completely petrified. Sia says it was okay, telling her to apologize to Zig after they defeated Medusa. Pulling herself together, the girl says she would do her best, but Sia didn't know what to do with monsters that used a petrification attack. However, her brother said not to worry, because he had brought a mirror that reflected everything. Meanwhile, the other man was battling Medusa. The monster, in turn, mentions that the boy was reaching his limit. Meanwhile, the other girl was healing his wounds, and together they use an attack to defeat the monster. Approaching the man, the girl asks if he was okay. Affirming he was, she is happy, saying they would fight, increasing the boy's attributes, asking Shia to help check the distance. Then the group returns to the battle. Meanwhile, the protagonist was still petrified, waiting for the time to end. Defending Medusa's attacks, Sia uses her skill to hit the monster. Then the other guy also attacks, throwing Medusa away. The monster, in turn, says they were really annoying. Then the other guy tells them to prepare for the second attack, asking the boy to deactivate it. At the same instant, Medusa uses her petrification skill, using the skill towards the adventurers. Grabbing the mirror, the boy positions it towards the skill, managing to reflect the attack. The group gets happy, questioning if they really had defeated her. However, they still hadn't, but they didn't need to fear because Medusa was petrified. Observing the monster, a light begins to emanate from her chest. Starting to crack, the petrification is undone. The monster, in turn, says that a human couldn't defeat her. The adventurers question how she had come out of petrification, preparing again for the battle. And using a skill, Medusa drastically lowers all the adventurers' HP. But one person was still standing because he had a skill to resist fainting. The boy is surprised because Medusa was alive, affirming that such a monster didn't have a skill like that. But even so, he needed to use the magic mirror again. Then Medusa uses her skill, petrifying all the adventurers. And the system informs that the petrification state couldn't be removed until the rotation died. Observing the mirror, Medusa mentions that it was a demonic structure and her only weakness. But that was before meeting Deborah, and now it didn't work anymore, because she had the power given by Deborah, making her immune to all status abnormalities and able to use certain skills of her master. The system informs that Medusa had received Deborah's protection, becoming stronger. Content: the monster says she wouldn't lose to anyone, and meanwhile the boy, still petrified, thinks he was wrong because it wasn't as if the pattern applied to all dungeons. Medusa, in turn, tells the boy to feel honored, because he would be defeated with a spell from Deborah, preparing a giant dark sphere. And when she was about to throw it at the boy, an unknown figure appears, decapitating Medusa and canceling the boy's petrification. The one who had done all that was Zig. The system informs that he had defeated Medusa, displeased, saying he had ruined everything. In the past, the protagonist asked if he could borrow the blacksmith's shop before leaving, because he wanted to make a weapon with those objects. Zig had excellent production skills, but since his level was low, he couldn't recreate that first-grade shield. However, he could use materials to make weapons. Observing the sword he had created, the boy is happy with his skill. The only problem was that this skill could be used only once, and that's why he wanted to save it for a crisis moment and never thought he would use it on Medusa. Then someone pulls him by the shirt. The adventurers start tossing him in the air because he had defeated Medusa with just one blow. Zig questions what they were doing, but the girl asks him not to be shy, saying it was as she said because the boy was really incredible. Hearing the girl's words, Zig remains silent, and at the same instant, they are teleported. The system informs that it was a secret room in the Ice Palace. Looking around, the other girl says she was deceived because there was nothing there. Starting to search, they realize it was empty. Then the boy thinks that maybe Medusa wasn't the boss. Zig, in turn, responds that probably not because Medusa is a boss-level character and still had a hidden attack pattern. Besides, there was something secret in that room. Falling to the ground, the girl asks if he was okay. But when he looks at the stone, he starts laughing, leaving the group confused, asking Sia to look at that stone, affirming that it was stained on the table. And looking at it, Zig uses his grain skill, starting to break the stone table, revealing a map. The two girls are surprised, questioning how he found that. Then the other guy asks to read it. Using his skill to decipher the message, it spoke about an ancient civilization that imitated God in its arrogance. At the same moment, the clock starts to ring, and a light begins to emanate in the room. Cutting to the director, the other guy asks if it was really true, because a flying fortress was discovered in just 2 weeks, affirming that it was as he thought, and that it was good he had delayed the update. If everything went as planned, there would be a lot of news and publicity. Returning to the protagonist, the group had been teleported to another place, and this system informs that they were the first to discover that fortress. All members received reputation points and the title of Discoverer of the Aerial Fortress. The group questions if that was the reward of the Ice Palace. At the same moment, another person appears asking if they were from the Cyan family, and a goat appears saying it was there to welcome them. Inside the fortress, the goat informs His Majesty that it had brought guests. Meanwhile, the group was questioning what kind of situation it was. In the king's chamber, the group of adventurers receives a welcome. The king says that he is the sole ruler of the Mycenaean kingdom, and his name is Ivanius. His level was 120, and he had the appearance of the ancient king of the Mycenaean kingdom. The two girls become desperate, thinking that he was a ghost, but the other boy asks them to calm down because it was just a specter, which was a ghost-type monster, leaving Shia even more desperate because it was indeed a ghost. However, the other girl asks Shia to remain calm because she would make it bright. The king, in turn, asks if they wouldn't listen to his story. Sometime later, His Majesty begins to tell the story. For thousands of years, his kingdom prospered and its magical technology benefited the world, thus ruling the kingdom in peace. However, that was a problem for being too advanced. His kingdom was devastated for the crime of invading the realm of the gods, and only a few survivors escaped through that airship. But in the end, they got trapped underground, becoming specters. Even so, he does not regret anything, and if it was wrong to seek knowledge, the gods should be blamed for creating humans that way. All the knowledge his people had built had disappeared from history. Mentioning that the airship was the only legacy of his kingdom, he wanted to build a fortress so that future generations would know of their achievements, asking for the group's help. Then the mission is presented and they should rebuild the aircraft. Not knowing what to do, one of the girls says she was in favor because she felt pity for that king. The protagonist says he was also in favor because hidden missions were not common, and knowing that game, if they ended up refusing, it would result in a battle, which they would definitely lose if they fought them in that situation. Then everyone agrees to participate in the mission. The system informs that they had accepted the mission and each member would be assigned a task. Presenting the task to the protagonist, the boy would have to reactivate a plant and make broken parts to repair the power plant. Observing that, Zig thinks everything was very difficult. Shia asks what missions they received. Answering what their missions would be, the king gives them a gift, where they end up surprised by the quality of them. Shortly after, the other boy asks if he could ask a question. Because the king had said they were the first guest in 300 years, asking if he was referring to Deborah from 300 years ago. The king affirms because that woman promised to rebuild his airship. Then the protagonist also wanted to ask another question, questioning where the exit to the surface was. However, he also didn't know because if he could, he would have already left. Various adventurers were observing the ice palace, questioning how difficult it was. Meanwhile, the girl who had stolen from the protagonist asks if they want a magic mirror. Because the boss, there was a Medusa. Thinking the boy says he didn't have a mirror, questioning how he would avoid the attacks. Shortly after, the girl presents her products. But at the same moment, she was almost hit by an object. And between the ice rift, Zig's group appears, mentioning that it was as he said because they just had to dig towards where they heard the wind. Observing around, he notices various adventurers staring at him. The crowd is confused because Zig had come out through the wall, and besides that, their titles were different, questioning what an airship was. At the same moment, a girl says her friend mentioned there was a benefit party in the ice palace. Then a crowd starts approaching the protagonist. Hiding in an ice rock, Sia says that talking about that calmly was very difficult, suggesting they discuss it in real life. Sometime later, the protagonist looking in the mirror questions what he should do, mentioning that he had worked hard to create an impressive character in the game. And if they saw him in real life, they would surely be disappointed, wondering if he should really go. Sometime later, a girl was presenting the news of Arpedia online, saying that the first news was about an incident that caused a revolution in the game community, because suddenly a fallen fortress appeared, and according to some sources, it was related to the discovery of the Ice Palace, questioning what the connection was between the aerial fortress and the Ice Palace. When they were about to mention the names of the people who discovered the place, a man pauses the video, saying that it was too tiring for now. Then a little girl questions why he was stopping them from entering the game because people wanted to find them. However, for the man, that was the problem because people just wanted to get information about the new dungeon. Then the girl mentions that they should be prepared. Looking at the clock, the guy questions why Zig had not arrived yet, mentioning that the protagonist was a bit late, and when he looks to the side, someone greets them. That was Zig, apologizing for being late. Sometime later, the little girl says that it was impossible because in the game the protagonist was different. Then everyone starts to introduce themselves. So Zig realizes that the guy was from the same dojo where he was training, leaving Sia surprised because the protagonist trains at her father's dojo, mentioning that there were many coincidences in the world. However, Zig is surprised by the news, because he didn't know she was Guilford's daughter, saying his name was Kang, leaving the girl surprised. Sometime later, they were talking about the two being childhood friends, saying it wasn't her fault for not recognizing him and it wasn't strange that his face was familiar. but still it had been a long time since they had seen each other, greeting the boy. However, the other girl asked them to focus because they met to discuss the mission. While they were discussing, time passed. And when it was getting dark, the group finishes discussing. Zig mentions that his house was in the opposite direction, so he was already leaving. However, Sia asks him to wait a bit, because they still wanted his contact. With the contact added, and Zig says it had been a while since he exchanged contacts. At the same moment, the boy receives a notification, wondering if it was one of the three who had taken his contact. When he looks at the phone, the protagonist questions what number that was, and when he answers, an unknown figure says it was a pleasure to meet him, calling him by the old nickname of his account. Zig, furious, asks who he was, mentioning that he was the person who had deleted his account, and that it was very fun to develop a new character. Then the protagonist starts to shout, so the person on the call questions why he was so sad because he had been very kind in the game. Confused, Zig asks if he had known him in the game, affirming the guy asks if he didn't remember, asking the protagonist to calm down because he hadn't called to fight. Composing himself, the boy asks what he wanted, asking just to make a bet, saying he was playing Arpedia just to discard hacked items, so they should play hide and seek before discarding all the items, and if he could find his character, he might end up returning Bart's. As he was a genius hacker, restoring a character was nothing. Questioning what would happen if he didn't catch him, the hacker responds that he would delete his blacksmith account. Then the boy becomes thoughtful, saying that if he found him, he would beat him to death, so he should be prepared. Sometime later, a guard says the guy was a genius, mentioning that there was no way to trace that call, asking the boy to give up. Zig says he already knew that would happen. Remembering the hacker's words, Zig thinks about who the person could be, and at the same moment he slaps his face to pull himself together. Because he couldn't be influenced by provocations, and one way or another, his plan was the same, which was to build a reputation as a blacksmith by tracking sales routes. Handing the hearts to the dwarf, the boy asks to learn his techniques. The dwarf, happy, says he really did it, mentioning that now he could complete the dragon. However, the protagonist still wanted to know how to dismantle it. Then the dwarf hands something to the boy. Questioning what that was, the man says it was his training material. That was a book that contained the essence of the large intestine, asking him to read it carefully. When the dwarf leaves, Zig thinks he was irresponsible, questioning if that was how he would teach him. Observing the book, Zig is surprised by the content. Then a mission is presented to the boy, apologizing to the dwarf for misunderstanding, mentioning that the book was the best and that he would absorb all its skills. Sometime later, the protagonist becomes nervous, not believing that it always ended in grains and that the plate was very fragile. According to the book's explanation, disassembly requires damage, but the durability was too low to begin with, questioning if he should give up. But remembering the hacker's words, the boy thinks he couldn't, saying he would do it until it was perfect. Meanwhile, the girl who had stolen from the protagonist was drinking, saying her business was ruined, and all because of Zig. However, it was the opposite because she should have followed the boy. A crowd in the background asks what was happening because there was a person donating items just because they had extras. Meanwhile, Zig was lying on the ground. The dwarf, in turn, was completely surprised because his dragon was actually moving. Returning to the protagonist, Zig was trying to assemble a clock. Then the system informs that it had been completed, making the boy happy. Taking a screenshot, Zig mentions that he thought it was an important moment, so he should take a picture. But at the same instant, fire starts to enter the house, and the one responsible for that was the dwarf's robot dragon. Observing that creature, the guy who invited Zig to the guild mentions that the event was incredible, affirming that he wanted to participate, but he had to find Zig, because he had ordered a large quantity of iron and had not received a notification from the messenger. At the same moment, an iron bar hits the guy, causing him to die. Observing that situation, the girl says that people were dying because of a dragon that appeared out of nowhere, mentioning that it was good luck. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the girl starts to steal items from other merchants. Then a shadow comes toward her, and it was the metal dragon standing before her with a threatening look. Preparing an attack, the girl questions why the dragon was in that place. When she was about to receive the attack, the dragon has a short circuit and ends up exploding, leaving the girl relieved because she was still alive. Returning to the protagonist in the courtroom, Zig says he had an objection, affirming that he had nothing to do with that dragon that destroyed the city. The dwarf in turn says that the boy also had nothing to do with it, leaving the boy emotional because he was trying to keep him out of it. The man says that Zig was only good for delivering messages and could be trusted, so the two start to argue. Then the judge asks them to be quiet, mentioning that the dwarf had joined hands with a human to create a dragon that destroyed the city. The dwarf says that the accident happened only because the Federation had rejected his suggestion, asking if everyone had seen that because it really was a dragon. And when he announced his project, everyone laughed at him, saying it would never fly. However, that had been the result. Besides, it was done at low cost and in a difficult environment. Observing the dwarf's words, Zig asks if he was going crazy, and if he continued talking, he would end up in prison for the rest of his life. The judge, in turn, asks everyone to be quiet, acknowledging that the incident was not his fault. However, the damage caused was enormous, mentioning that he was supporting the production costs, and within a month they would produce the equivalent of the damage. saying that the dwarf was condemned to make a weapon capable of defeating the Enduras. And if it was not delivered, not only he but also the protagonist would go to prison. Sometime later, the boy questions why the dwarf had said that, and because of it, he would go to prison. However, the man tells him not to worry because he didn't say it without thinking, mentioning that he needed the protagonist to go to the Fire Mountain, affirming that the reason for the dragon's failure was for another reason, saying various things about fixing it. Meanwhile, the protagonist tries to leave and the dwarf grabs the boy by the arm, questioning where he was going, because he would give a reward if he did it for him. Zig questions what the reward would be. The dwarf, in turn, responds that he had a glove capable of shooting steel wires with simple controls, besides being made of special materials. Handing the glove, the boy is happy, asking what he should do, giving the order again to go to the Flaming Mountain and get a dragon's heart. Then the mission is presented. The protagonist will have to go to the sacred sanctuary and collect the dragon's heart. The dragon's heart was the source of its magic, an extremely rare item that could only be obtained with a ridiculous 47% rate after defeating a dragon or discovering where a dragon died, mentioning that not even when he was on Bart's account did he manage to get a heart like that. The dwarf, in turn, says he heard something when visiting the elves' village in the past, that the dragon near the former elf chief went to the Flaming Mountain to find peace. Zig becomes disoriented, questioning if that dwarf was telling him to go after a dragon with unreliable information. Besides, in that place, players needed to be at least level 80. Sometime later, the protagonist was flying in a balloon, and meanwhile, someone was watching him. Zig, even in the balloon, was still practicing his assembly. However, a rope hits his tool, knocking it down. The boy questions if there was something wrong with the balloon. Looking down, he notices that girl with a frightened look. However, the boy asks what he meant and if he knew how expensive houses with a window were. Inside the speech bubble, Zig says he almost fell because of her, and since he had already helped, the girl should go away. However, she says she won't let Zig go away, questioning if the protagonist thought she didn't know, because Zig was going after the air fortress. Then 3 days pass after the incident. Near the blazing mountain, the boy says they arrived quickly. While they walked, the girl was crying and the protagonist says he was off duty and had things to do. But the girl asks where he would go and why they were in that place, because that place was extremely dangerous, besides the fact that only people level 80 and above could go there. At that moment, a monster appears behind the two. The system alerts that it was a scorpion soldier, a creature that burrows through the volcanic region. As the monster approaches the girl, she wonders why that always happens. Desperately, she asks Zig to finish off that thing. With no way out, the protagonist thinks he should do it. At that moment, a crowd of scorpions start moving towards them. With tears in his eyes, Zig states they were doomed. However, the girl still didn't want to die, asking the boy to do something. When they would be attacked, someone shoots an arrow at the scorpion, where several lizard men appear, defeating all those monsters. Zig had no idea what happened, but they had helped them, questioning if they could understand what he was saying. At that moment, the two are tied up, mentioning that the human who had invaded their territory would serve as a sacrifice. The protagonist wonders where they were taking him because he never met a lizard man when he was on Bart's account. Meanwhile, the girl begged to be able to leave, saying to eat Zig in her place. Sometime later, the protagonist was sleeping, and when he wakes up, the lizards begin to pull the two by a rope. The protagonist tries to ask for help for the girl, but she was already totally discouraged. Zig, on the other hand, starts shouting, questioning the lizards why they would do that. Then the lizard answers they needed a sacrifice, leaving the boy annoyed, asking who they were calling a sacrifice. Then the boy feels his foot entering the lava, starting to scream in pain. The lizard man asks him to be quiet and just accept his sacrifice by cutting the rope. Zig was desperate because his life was about to end. However, someone asked them to stop and release the humans. That was the chief of the lizard men, mentioning that they were messengers of the mighty Hone. Sometime later, the chief wonders if those humans really were the messengers. Then the lizards start arguing, saying they didn't need the help of the humans, asserting that he was strong, but Zig mentions they had defeated the scorpions just because they were in greater numbers. The lizard asks the protagonist to be quiet, and the boy warns the elder that lizard was intimidating him. Observing the two, the chief says they should calm down, asking to take the two to prison. Sometime later, the two were begging to get out, claiming they were messengers of the mighty Hone and needed their help. Meanwhile, the two lizards were talking, asking to get rid of those humans. However, the chief says they should follow Hone's words and were not strong enough to defeat the shamans. The other lizard says that Hone was right because the lizards weren't enough. Even so, he didn't like those humans. But the word of the powerful Hone was absolute, saying that he should already know what to do, asking to release the humans. Meanwhile, the boy tried to break the iron beams, destroying the cell. The boy says that only that would not stop it. The two begin to discuss, then Zig mentions that if they continued, would leave her behind. At that moment, that lizard appears, realizing that the two had escaped from the cell. Then the two start running away from the lizard. The lizard man asks them to wait because they needed to talk. But Zig wasn't in the mood for conversation, showing the middle finger, questioning if he thought they would stop. The lizard man replies that was why he hated humans. Giving a sign to his companions, he closed the way, realizing that they were cornered. The boy says they had no way out. The lizard, in turn, tries to warn that he needed to talk to him, Zig thinks they were caught and now would be thrown into the lava, taking his pickaxe to defend himself, mentioning that if there was no way he would create one by destroying the wall. The lizard man tries to say he couldn't break that wall, but it was already too late and a specter in the form of an eye watched them. An unknown figure mentions that he had found, mentioning that he was on the western continent and had found it easy thanks to the collapse of the cave. Then the other girl gives the order for her subordinates to go. While they fled, the lizard asked what he had done, but Zig said he had just made an exit. But the lizard mentioned that it was a serious situation. At the same moment, a giant sphere appears behind them. While fleeing, Zig wonders if that was the fire mage. Then several human soldiers emerge in the middle of that situation. That woman from before was also there, defeating the lizards. A bloody battle ensues. Meanwhile, Zig asks what was happening and where those people came from. Moreover, all those soldiers had a very high level. Realizing that more humans had arrived, a lizard man prepares for battle, calling his men to fight. The protagonist observes them, asking what he was talking about, questioning if that lizard man didn't realize they were outnumbered. Then someone grabs him by the arm. It was the chief of the lizards. In the battle, the muscular girl massacres the lizard soldiers, but it was the other lizard that she would face now. Sometime later, the battle had already ended, and that lizard was defeated on the ground. The girl in turn was torturing him, telling him to apologize for being arrogant. The lizard says he wouldn't do anything a human asked, asking to be killed. But the girl still wanted to have fun torturing him, affirming that she would pluck out one of his eyes. Another girl appears, saying that was enough. It was Sia, warning that the mission was to take the nest and not to torture the lizards. The other girl asks who she was to give orders, telling her to shut up or they would fight. Then the lizard bites her foot. While the lizard flees, the girl starts to scream in pain. Sometime later, the lizard man was with the protagonist group. His chief, in turn, mentions that he was about to explain their stories to the humans. Zig says he didn't know the details, asking if he was the cause of that, apologizing. However, for the lizard, just apologizing wasn't enough, mentioning that the fight comes with death and that couldn't be reversed, and because of them, they failed to protect the nest. The boy asks what he was talking about and if he was going crazy, starting to argue with the lizard, but the chief asked them to calm down, asking them to listen to what he had to say. His tribe had protected a dragon's legacy for a long time, because the flame assembly was there and also the tomb of Hideya's. Seeing the points connecting, the protagonist questions if it could be the dragon's heart. Meanwhile, Sia's group was still in that place, but there was still a lizard man in front of them capable of using magic. Returning to the protagonist, the group starts talking about a shaman. Everything had started when that child had betrayed them. She stood out from other children when she was young. Besides being intelligent, she spoke perfectly and could even use magic. No other word besides genius could describe her, and for that, the chief gave her the position of shaman. And to live up to their expectations, she rejuvenated her tribe. However, one day she began to act differently because suddenly she started desiring the power of the dragon's heart, where she ended up planning to turn the entire tribe into slaves. The lizard had trusted her, but she was taken by greed and dared to steal the legacy of the mighty Hone. The power of the heart should be used to protect the flaming mountain. Questioning if she was planning to destroy their home, they imprisoned her, but in the end she escaped. Later it seemed that she hadn't given up on the dragon's heart because she began to hire humans to attack them. They fought with all their might, but without the dragon's heart, chaos would fall on the flaming mountain. Because if the legacy of the Great Hone disappeared, the volcanic power that the heart was suppressing would explode. The girl, in turn, asked if they should escape from that place, but the lizard responds that they would be fine for now, because they put the dragon's heart in the lava, so they couldn't do anything for now. Returning to the other lizard, he informs the humans about the ceremony held once a month to empower the heart. Only 1 week remained for the ceremony, and they would definitely return to take that place within that period. And if they protected that place, the lizard would pay them double. The other girl, in turn, mentions that among all the NPCs, he was the one she liked the most, affirming that she would protect that cave for a week. Observing that group, Shia becomes pensive. Returning to the protagonist's group, the chief of the lizards warns that if they don't recover the dragon's heart, the flaming mountain would explode completely. Sometime later, the protagonist's group was walking through a desert. The girl, in turn, questions if the boy was going crazy, making a scene with the words that Zig had said before, asking if he hadn't seen those people before because they were extremely strong. Zig, in turn, thinks that the woman had followed him of her own free will and yet was getting on his nerves. At the same moment, the girl notices something. Looking at that Egyptian statue, she asks what it was. Then the system informs that it was a guardian sculpture of the dungeon from another world. Meanwhile, Sia was lying in her room, asking her companion how her mission was going. Responding that she hadn't found anything, she asks how hers was going, leaving the girl thoughtful about everything that had happened. Responding that she didn't know. Realizing there was no answer, she asked if her friend had fallen asleep. Returning to the protagonist, the system informs that he had succeeded in dismantling and obtained a solid iron plate. His dismantling skill increased to level 10, mentioning that he should stay up all night if he wanted to finish it on time. Then the protagonist gives an order to the lizards. However, the other one says he didn't like taking orders from a human because he should train. Zig, in turn, says that was why they had failed, questioning why they thought they had lost to the humans. But for the lizard, they hadn't been defeated yet. The protagonist asks the lizard to use his head because there were numerous reasons for losing, and the biggest reason was that they had terrible equipment, mentioning that with that weapon, they would end up being massacred, and that was why he would change their equipment entirely. However, the lizard says that it was a memento from his father, leaving the boy surprised. The system informs that it was a memento, and the boy apologizes. The lizardman says it was okay, affirming that it was just a weapon and had no other significance. But for Zig, he felt even worse describing the weapon that way, saying he would fix it, saying he would make it better and more beautiful than before. Sometime later, the protagonist hands the axe to the lizard. However, to him it hadn't been restored because it looked strange. The boy asks why he thought it was strange because he thought it looked really cool, but the lizard says he didn't need that. Returning to the girl, she was observing the chief's necklace, saying that the necklace was extremely expensive. Approaching the lizard, she mentions that the necklace was very beautiful, questioning if he wanted to trade that stone for his necklace. However, he doesn't accept because the necklace was given by the great Ideas, leaving the woman even more excited because the necklace was truly incredible, showing various things to see if the lizard would accept. The lizard, in turn, asks if she didn't want to trade it for what was in his hand, leaving the girl even more excited, because it was a desert rose used as an ingredient for the greatest magical stones. Meanwhile, in Sia's group, the girl was furious, questioning when Zig's group would attack them. The other guy, noticing her stress, thinks that the girl really had little patience. Then a man asks where he is going, and responding, the guy says that at that rate, he would lose his mind and was going out for a walk. While walking in the desert, the man notices that girl, calling her. The guy asks if she was the one who had fooled with the lizardman, questioning if he could ask a question. Realizing the girl had ignored him, the guy draws his sword, questioning where the lizards were hiding, because if she didn't say, he would take her life. The girl, in turn, asks what was wrong with that guy. The man asks if she was provoking him, but it wouldn't work. About to attack the girl, Zig appears in the middle of the fight using that arm-breaking skill. Zig, however, asks why the girl was there because she was very weak, starting to argue with her. Then the other guy says he didn't know she had a boyfriend, quickly both deny it. But for the man, something was going on between them, and in any case, relationships between men and women were a blight on society, saying he would destroy everything. Zig asks what was wrong with that guy, questioning if he wanted him to attack him. At the same moment, the man advances towards the protagonist, but when he looks to the side, he notices an army of lizards. The lizard shaman, in turn, gives the order to prepare for battle, because the lizardmen were approaching. At the same moment, the player who is attacking Zig ends up dying. Along with the army, they advance. Using his skill, the gray-haired guy warns that the lizardmen were approaching. The army gets excited, preparing for battle. Then the mages together use fire magic. The other guy says it must have been a success, and at that rate, the lizardmen should have been annihilated, and they would clean up the remnants. When they look among the destruction, they end up being surprised, because the lizards were completely unharmed and still in armor. The mages are surprised that they had survived such an attack. Zay, among the lizards, asks if it wasn't incredible, mentioning that the armor was made by mixing the essence of a mage slime, an essence with low attack and defense power but incredibly strong against magic. Then one of the men recognizes the protagonist, saying he was famous in the city of Baldin, known as the King of Repairs. The other guy asks if he was also a blacksmith because he thought he was a ranker. Hearing that the boy had insulted him, Zig becomes furious, asking them to fight him, giving the order for the lizards to advance. During the battle, one of the enemies says that the lizardmen were nothing, but at the same moment, his attack is blocked, leaving the guy surprised, questioning if they had always had that armor, warning his companions to be careful, because now the lizards were very strong. Meanwhile, his companions were being massacred, warning that they should run because they had no chance. But the other woman was still battling them, saying that her companions were cowards because they were just lizards. At the same moment, another lizard appears attacking her, managing to defend herself just barely. Realizing that the lizard returned with different armor, she asks if he thought it would make any difference. The lizard, in turn, says to return their nest, advancing towards her. While they were dueling, she thinks that the lizard was stronger than before. However, even if a mob improved, he was still a monster, using her rage blood skill, increasing her attributes, where she ends up breaking the lizard's armor. A flashback of the lizard appears with the protagonist questioning why he wasn't wearing armor. But the lizard says he didn't need it because a warrior's armor was his body. Even so, Zig puts the armor on him, mentioning that it was light. Besides, he had worked harder to make it since he was the leader, and with it, he would have another chance to live. The lizard says that death was nothing during the battle, but the boy asks if he would keep saying nonsense, because his main duty was to protect the legacy of his tribe, questioning why he talked as if his life was nothing. Returning to the present, the lizard says that Zig was right, because the lives of his companions were important, affirming that he would protect everyone in his tribe. The protagonist, observing the battle, thinks they would easily win because the circumstances were on their side. Remembering his plan, he affirms that he could get his hands on the dragon's heart, but ends up remembering the chief's words about what would happen if he removed the heart from the place, mentioning that he had forgotten the most important thing. And the most important thing was the quest, affirming that he was making the armor thanks to him, so he just needed to evacuate everyone from the volcano, thinking that no one was paying attention to him. But at the same moment, he is shot in the foot with an arrow, falling to the ground screaming in pain, asking if that was an attack from the shaman. Observing that silhouette, he realizes it was a player, who wasn't attacking to kill, but to restrict movements, questioning if it wouldn't be easier to kill quickly. But Zig didn't have time to think about that, because they needed to see him to shoot. The girl mentions that she couldn't see her target because of the rocks, so the protagonist advances towards her. In front of the girl, he realizes it was Shia, surprised to have met again. Meanwhile, the other girl was inside a cave, wondering how Zig's group was doing. The elder says that everything would be fine thanks to the items the protagonist had made, affirming that they should thank him after returning. But for the girl, if he wanted to thank them, he should do it with actions and not just words. Starting to wear all the lizard's clothes, the girl says that something was missing, that necklace that was on his neck, but the lizard says he couldn't, because that necklace was given by Master Hone. Then another voice says that was problematic. It was the shaman, saying that without that necklace, he wouldn't be able to brainwash the lizards, attacking the lizardmen, asking if the chief thought he was also being deceived like the others, because if he thought so, he was wrong. His goals were to be alone with him from the beginning. The chief, in turn, asks how the shaman was there. Then the shaman starts talking about that necklace, which was an item capable of communicating with spirits and also brainwashing creatures with low intelligence. Then the lizard chief tries to call his guards, but it was useless because the shaman had put everyone in the tribe to sleep, affirming that he never thought he would send almost all the troops to the nest. The chief questions why he was doing all that, furious. The shaman says that he should know the reason, due to the stupid rule he had made, saying to finish it once and for all. But at that moment, the girl interrupts the fight. Returning to the protagonist, she asks why Zig was in that place. The boy mentions that he was there because of a quest, questioning what she was doing. With both answering the same, they ask what each other's mission was, starting to argue over who would say it first. Then Sia says she was on a quest to rebuild the aerial fortress, remembering when she met an elf, asking him how to find it. But the man apologizes because the wings of the wind were kept in the spirit dormitory. Desperate, the girl asks where she could find the spirit. But for a human, it would be impossible to find a spirit, because it was a place where elementals live and humans don't understand that place. If they entered once, they would never return. Then Sia thinks about what she could do because she needed to get her hands on the wings of the wind. The elf mentions that there was another way to get them. A long time ago, her ancestors gave a necklace to Hideas, and if she had the necklace of the spirit and the soul, she should be able to hear the words of the spirits. Sometime later, Sia was lying down saying it was useless, because she had been searching for the flaming mountain for days and no necklace had appeared. Then the shaman appears, asking if that was the necklace she was looking for. Realizing it was, Sia asks where she could find it, and while he swings it, she ends up seeing that it was a lizard man. Returning to the present, Zig asks if it was the shaman who had talked to her, and the girl says yes, because she had heard she desired that necklace. At the same moment, a lizard attacks Shia, saying that she was the last human. Seeing the girl on the ground, Zig asks why he attacked his friend, but the lizard responds that she had killed his people, asking if Zig was betraying them, but that wasn't it. Then when Sia stands up, the lizard army was against the two. The protagonist, with no way out, thinks about what he should do, questioning if he should give up on Sia, because if he died, his quest would fail. If they fought the lizardmen, it would also be an option, because if he used his arm-breaking skill, his chances would increase. Then the lizard mentions that the lives of comrades were precious, affirming that he was also one of their comrades. Zig, dropping his weapons, says he wouldn't fight them. The lizard asks to hand over the girl, but Zig didn't want to, warning that Sia was his comrade, so he couldn't do that. The lizardman becomes furious, saying that it was absurd, asking again to hand her over. Even so, the protagonist didn't want to, saying he wouldn't fight them or hand over his friend. But the girl mentions that it was okay because there was no reason for them to fight, affirming that they were all mistaken, because the lizard chief deceived them all. Returning to the other girl, the shaman asks if she knew who she was protecting. The girl in turn says she had no idea, but she couldn't let someone die in front of her because it had been a long time since she had found a treasure. Realizing she had expressed her desires, she becomes embarrassed. In any case, the shaman couldn't take him because she hadn't finished talking to him yet. The shaman asks her to step aside. At the same moment, he is stabbed. Not just him, but also the girl goes along, saying that his plans were sloppy and emotional, questioning if the same thing hadn't happened that time. To ensure you don't miss the next part, activate the notification bell and see you next time on Tob's channel.